This is Finger Be Eaten. Colvin's on the other end, I think. I'm not sure. But here we go with our... How many years have we been doing this, Andrew?
When Larry King was first starting out, wasn't it?
Larry King?
Yeah. Or Regis Philbin, Jurassic era? I don't know.
Okay.
In the early days of television.
I just got one question as you mentioned it. My God, how in the world, one, could that woman marry Larry King? And two, what's her sister thinking about? Jeez.
Well, yeah, I don't know.
Dust.
I didn't look into that very much.
You don't know what happened?
Well, I know what happened, but I guess people get detached from reality, I suppose.
Well, you got to be to do that show, but I mean, still and all, I mean, God Almighty, I mean, he's jump ugly, man. You know, he's probably got a Chinese mushroom for a unit.
Yeah, I saw him. I ate at a table next to him here in Seattle many years ago. It was in the 90s, and he looked really unbelievably old and decrepit then. And I mean, just so small and frail. So I don't know. I guess it's. Do you think it's that they really love him? Do you think that's it?
Well, let's put it this way.
He must be entertaining and funny.
No, he's got a big Johnson. That would mean his wallet. Secondly, I bet you when he has to boink her, or she feels she has to boink him, she turns the lights out. She's got him. I mean, come on, man. Christmas. Anyway, so much for that. And the other one I like too is Alan Greenspan. Are you serious? Now, Andrea Mitchell, is okay. I mean, she's, not some 28-year-old ingenue, although she did go through a makeover a couple of years ago where they actually made her look like presentable. She went blonde and all that stuff. But still, I mean, how do you come home and bang him? I don't get it. And what do you got to call him sir because he's a knight now? So what does that make Andrea Mitchell? Dame Mitchell? All right. Now that we dumped on them. Well, they deserve dumping on.
Well, Greenspan, he screwed up everything.
Oh, that's funny.
Is a finger at somebody.
Oh, is that a pun?
Yeah.
He screwed everyone? Okay.
He's screwing her and everyone else. With his, let the banks run wild, plan for home buying.
Well, yeah.
Created the whole crisis.
But
go ahead.
But no, Andrew, I mean, the thing is, these guys don't make up their decisions either. They make them out like they're financial pundits and savants and all this, but they get told exactly what to do. Greenspan got knighted. Why? Because that whole Federal Reserve obviously is run by the Brits, by the IMF. That's why he got knighted, because he did good service to the crown and screwed us as usual, who have been screwed since the Revolutionary War. No, we didn't win it, but don't worry about it. And then so anyway, whatever they blame him on, he did what he was told. Just like Paulson did what he was told. Oh, and I got to tell you, I saw Geithner on for the first time. I woke, for some strange reason, I got up early, like 5 or something, and they were running an interview with Geithner on Fox Business. And I'm like, I never heard such bullshit in all my life. It's like, I wish the other guy also was an egghead that, like, understood that kind of bullshit. And I'm like, I felt like putting my head inside the TV and looking at them both and going, guys, what are you talking about? It's just such bullshit. So anyway, they're just, look, the head of the Fed is not a U.S. employee. He is a governor of the IMF. So, I hear this stuff. Well, Congress has to confirm them. Congress has never not confirmed one. Why? Because they're also told to do what they're told. So the IMF throws somebody out there, the Congress confirms them, everybody's happy. And the other thing I also have to laugh at, Ian, I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican. I think they both suck. But somehow, some way, this whole housing bubble explosion and the financing behind it becomes like Obama's problem all of a sudden, like he's the one that did it. And although I can't stand him and I couldn't stand George Bush before him, folks, do you remember when this all started, maybe 10 years ago? And guess who was president then? Oh, no. They have immediate amnesia. Nothing happened before Obama's presidency. And so it goes, and so it goes.
I'm just disturbed by this anti-American, anti-British, comment you made,
Yes, well, you should be disturbed.
I've been told that now from the media that talking bad about the British is un-American.
It is. You're absolutely right. Listen, you and I just happen to live in this plantation corporation. All right? That's all there is to it. When they talk about patriotism, run, because they usually either want to kill your ass or take more money away from you. I pay my taxes. I'm a good employee of the corporation known as the United States of America. Leave me alone.
Have you talked recently about the whole, or did we do this the last time where you were talking about how we never bought any of the land that the British owned?
Actually, that was between
they still own it.
Wasn't that between you and me off mic, or do we really do that on?
I think it was off.
Yeah, it was, because, I started looking at the purchases that the United States made, and of course with the Informer's information from a couple of years ago in the books I got, you take a look around, and we paid the Spanish for the Gadsden, and we paid the French for the Louisiana Purchase, and we stole most of the other shit. And then I started thinking about it, and it's like, we never really paid the crown for the 13 colonies turned estates. And of course people say, well, that's because we won the Revolutionary War. Well, we didn't win the Revolutionary War. Damn King George drafted the terms. The losers aren't supposed to do that. And if you read the terms, it's like business as usual. And yeah, you guys can call yourself states. And they still suck the money out of us, which is really all they wanted. So why send any more German Hessians over to die? It's not worth it. And what I have to laugh about that war too. I mean, for the length of that war, there were relatively few big battles. And I don't know that Britain sent over their best blood for this one. Most of them were for hire. So what you're dealing with guys who were cousins. Even though that they were colonists, they had, most of the guys they probably were fighting with, they're related to. If it wasn't that, they were Masonic brothers. So why can't we let what I think? I think sometimes guys like Hamilton or whatever, we're going to fight, and they just kind of like sent memos back saying, look, you're a brother, I'm a brother. Why don't we let this one pass? And they're like, yeah, okay, forget it. I mean, is it, huh?
Well, I feel it's my duty, since I'm at the left-wing fringe of the conspiracy movement, which puts me about right next to the right-wingers almost.
Yeah, right.
A little gap there between us.
Yeah, your butt ends are both touching.
I feel it is my duty to ask the question, was this oil rig disaster sabotage? And if so, was it the British, and is it related to wanting to keep Louisiana, the land of the Moors, supposedly, where they first came? And, there's tons of evidence that they were there for 10,000 years, just to keep them under their boot heel.
Here's what's going to happen. Since you posed that question, and since we are going to have dialogue on it, folks, I also want to welcome you to That Was the Week That Wasn't, number 21. And guess who's here with us again? Andy Colvin. So let's take it away. Seriously.
Are we doing, now we've switched shows?
No, we're doing them, we're alternating back and forth, and I'm not going to split them up.
Okay.
All right, a couple things. One, first of all, anybody who reads anything by that absolute knuckle-dragging, asshole cretin, Sorcha you got to be bull goose loony as she is, or whatever I don't even know if she exists. This Russian, I got the scoop first idiot who said, oh, well, she's got a new one out every week. And this is what always cracks me up. It's like, is there no vetting process? No, I mean, does anybody like me on a network, like if I were back on the radio, I'd still do this. It'd be like, hey, let's get a hold of Sorcha and ask her why she's been wrong for the last 27,000 weeks. And how she can keep putting shit out like that with this little Russian at the end. She has, get this, a North Korea submarine getting into the Gulf and let the missile go, which created the breach in the rig. I mean, oh God, this is what
I would imagine that Sorcha. This is a wild guess. lives at 1111 Independence Avenue in Akron. That building that we've talked about before, which has all the strange antenna on top, and trucks in the parking lot that have Army or Air Force 25th Airborne, which is the very newest division of the Army, designed to go after to do web disinformation, internet monitoring, and all that.
Good point. Before we get really back down to what in the world is happening with that situation, which as we're speaking at this moment about, and that would be a Sunday, a little bit after 3 o'clock Eastern PM, that is. What it really, again, has even gotten worse since the last time I guessed one of my shows, ending at that time Beyond the Grassy Knoll. The amount of people that are out there in blogs and in this conspiracy realm, I mean, I'm telling you straight out, whatever mental and emotional condition they're in, they're messed up. But you know what cracks me up? It's like love, where anybody who's out there with a blog, as nutsy as they can be, man, there's some followers for him or her. I went through a couple today. I'm telling you, I want to do a Jimi Hendrix on my computer. So get down on my knees, you know, and hearken the flames upward. What was that called?
The what show?
What song was that when he burnt the guitar? Wasn't it something sacrifice?
I should know this.
Yeah, I know. Ooh.
I live next to we have that building right next to his childhood home. I saw it on TV, the video not long ago. Can't remember. Sorry.
No, that's all right. I mean, it was something sacrifice. That's what I think it was. At any rate, that's what I would want to do, because that people are not this, you know, all I can say is we're in really bad shape. This whole nation is. All right. Now the BP thing. Is it sabotage? Well, it certainly could be. Or else this is the greatest that any company who should know what they're doing has ever committed. The other thing is this. Everybody likes to be out there first, Andy, saying, oh, you know, this is what they're doing. Nobody knows. Everybody guesses at the beginning. You don't have to be the first one out, especially when it's not with the accurate information or the first speculation. It doesn't matter. What happens in the end will tell you what that was about, just like that Polish air crash. You know, that's disappeared now from like the radar screens, excuse me, not trying to be punny, and nobody says anything about it. Well, where's all the big where's all the big conspiracy? What is happening in Poland now that might have been different, other than they have to do another whole, you know, government infusion of human beings.
That's an excellent point. You look at the end result of things, and that's how you.
Yeah, that'll tell you. Relax, slow down. Now, with this kind of thing, here's the first thing that made me think it might be sabotage, but it ain't over yet. Obama comes out, and of course, it's not Obama, because the Rockefellers and the other petroleum oligarchs are handling this. Well, no more drilling in the Gulf, no more drilling up in Alaska. I don't know how that figures in with the Gulf, except, okay, it's because like nobody knows how to drill anymore. Everybody's stupid. So nothing happens now with any of the oil resources in North America. What does that do? That makes what? Foreign oil more important now.
Yes.
Does that give us an excuse now to say, hey, look, you know, we got to go over there and make sure we get our share of the oil, because if we don't, you know, those bad old Chinese and Russians are going to take it. That's now I'm starting to get the feeling that was no, that might have been sabotage.
Yes, it pushes us in that direction. I don't know. I don't think they still have renegotiated that lease from 1925 that was up in 2000, which prompted Cheney to organize the whole invasion. So I don't think we have a written agreement in place. So this makes that more important and makes our presence there more important. And it's a reason to keep the troops there.
Oh, yeah, right. Even if it really isn't about the oil, which I don't really think it is. It's a justification. All you gotta do is freak out Americans they did this stuff in the early 70s when it got everybody pissed off, I think probably at Muslims for the first time ever. Or as we called them back then, Arabs. We didn't give a crap, if they were Chaldeans or if they were Muslims or whatever. And that is, they were telling everybody that our 7th Fleet would be crippled because of what those bad old Arabs did in OPEC. So I remember everybody was all fired up and let's go and kick some ass. Of course, that was not the case, but it didn't matter. They eventually let the oil come back in at about quadruple the prices that there was before, from which we've never recovered. So anyway.
Well, we already identified, you and I, in a show maybe a year ago that it had been revealed that they were going to change the structure of the way that they gouge us from pump issues regarding domestic distribution to international distribution. And this is a widely known thing in the business. They're going to keep prices up using pirates and so on and so forth.
Oh yeah, that's right. Whatever happened to all the Somali pirates? Did they just go away now too?
Well, we had another one not too long ago.
Well, you got to keep the home fires stoked,
So. Yeah, and this plays right into that whole scenario, and these are, they must have been doing this for decades. They just alternate, the type of scam that they're using.
Exactly.
Nobody ever catches on.
No, and they keep cycling it around and around. You're right. But the one thing I always thought about that situation with the Somali pirates, it was going to be that intense. First of all, don't tell me they don't have birds up above that can watch this stuff. Secondly, if that's the case, you don't have to chase them with boats, idiots. You've got probably carriers out there, or at least people you can send out from Diego Garcia, and send out fighter jets and just blow their ass out of the water. That's it. Case closed. See you later. We're back. What's with the chasing them, but with the ships? And I don't know if I'm right. I mean, I believe that it could be done if it were that big a problem. And also throw some, really big caliber machine guns on the thing.
Well, they could also send out some of those giant beetles that they've robotically modified.
Here we go.
to fly by command. These are real beetles that have been cybernetically hooked up to little computer chips and controlled by remotely telling the beetles what to do.
How far can those beetles fly, those poor things?
I don't know.
It would seem they might want to use something else like some kind of transoceanic bird or something.
Well, there's so many smoking little red flags, I guess you could call them, around this oil thing, and starting off with Halliburton being the one responsible, more or less, for controlling how that oil's coming out of the water or the pipe and making sure that the systems are in place. And they were the ones who were doing the backfill the wrong way, or whatever it was. They weren't using the mud. They were using water, which allowed the blow to occur. And they had identified the problem apparently 2 weeks before. So why they were there doing a celebration is a little odd, because it was Hitler's birthday. Were they there celebrating Hitler's birthday?
Achtung. No,
that's what I wonder.
To our glorious... no.
So many little strange things that point toward it being purposeful or negligent, and so.
Well, we did an Inside the Grassy Knoll Ezine, and we did it with the opening line from T.S. Eliot's Wasteland poem. April is the cruelest month, and April is the strangest month, and it apparently has been the strangest month, perhaps definitely across centuries, perhaps millennia. I don't know. But that would also occur at that time.
Did I mention the astrological connection to that? Bruce Bickford was telling me about this.
No.
March is Aries, correct? Or is it? It's in my notes here somewhere. I was going to talk about it.
You were asking the wrong boy with that.
March is the last. There's a cycle with astrology that involves the human body, and it moves up and down the human body with each of the 12 segments. So when you're in March, you're at the feet, and then it starts over again in April at the head, and that's probably why. Well, I think they manufacture events. It's either a question of, is astrology affecting these events in this way, or are people mapping out how the media works to follow this kind of astrological pattern, or are they feeding each other? I don't know, but it does seem to be. There are often messages in March in the media telling you to change direction or to start over. It's supposed to be the most impressionable time of the year, and that astrological sign is the most impressionable. And April isn't a whole lot different because you're starting over in a way, and you're not. I guess there's a break there from March, a real break in terms of symbolically, but you're still at the end of a cycle. Not the end, but I mean you're at the pole. You're still at a pole, which is not a usual. The poles always have different characteristics than the rest of the globe, or even if it's a hurricane, the eye of the hurricane is the most stable in a way, so it has different characteristics. And I've been doing some reading on magnetism lately, which we can maybe get into a little later when I go through the notes.
Oh, what a strong attraction you must have to it.
There's been a lot. Well, they're finding that magnetism affects morality. So if you can change the magnetic field around someone, you can affect their behavior. That's just one of the things.
Okay.
Did you want to talk more about this recent week?
No, it's just whatever you want to do. But the thing with BP is that it's not over yet, apparently. And if you heard what Denton and I did quite a bit of time together, but what Denton was saying, and he was not saying it's a case, he was conjecturing out loud, which made me ask him that whatever they're doing there may be a point at which they really can't stop the thing until the thing starts to settle down to some extent. I mean, everything they're doing just might be for public consumption. Well, we're just loaded with verbal irony today.
There was one of the sage old geologists has said that it will just come out until it stops, unless someone drills another well there to take the pressure off. And
this may just be a coincidence, but what I had said to him also, and you might have heard me say, and that is that when I went back looking in archives or something, I came out with probably a story around in 1985 in the Wall Street Journal, which talked about an oil well drilled out in the Louisiana part of the Gulf, that as they drilled it and were tapping it, it was expanding instead of constricting its supply. And this, because one of the reasons why this was interesting to us, because we were, Harry and I at that time were talking about, don't give us this peak oil crap. And there's an example of it. But now I'm wondering if the tragedy of all this thing is if there is something of a mother lode in that area, if that story in the Wall Street Journal is talking about the same proximity, that where this rig is right now, it's like, holy mackerel. And here's another thing for you too. Most people wouldn't be thinking about this because you're not down here in the Gulf. But man, I'll tell you, if a hurricane comes in here or a big tropical storm and it's going into the Gulf and that stuff is moving in this loop cycle that they are talking about, one or two things are going to happen. And that is, one, it might clear it all up, just basically aerosolizing it, or it may make it worse. Nobody knows. But I tell you, everybody's pretty much hushed and waiting. It's too early usually now for Gulf hurricanes. We're the ones that get them in September through November because the Gulf stays warmer than any other body of ocean on either side of us. But man, I tell you what, this is not the time for an early one. And who knows, where this thing is going to go trucking around. So that's something people aren't thinking about, and that is what happens if a hurricane comes in there and that sucker's sitting out there, that big mess. Yeah,
and they've got another one called the Atlantis that they're working on that's got 15 wells that come together into one pipe.
Yeah.
Then if that pipe gets broken, you've got 15 wells spewing. And they haven't even done the proper safety paperwork on that rig either.
Yeah, I mean, that's so sloppy and so negligent. I can't even believe that isn't deliberate. And then again, now they're talking about bringing criminal charges against BP personnel. That ain't going to happen. It's just like when the Senate subcommittees, like they were doing recently, wagging their finger and talking tough to Goldman Sachs executives. And the executives are looking back at them like, kiss my ass. And it's like,
maybe this is a drive to just cripple the region. The Brits are known for this kind of thing. And there's speculation that, they influence the national parks creation in order to hold some lands off for later.
No.
And that Smithsonian was involved in all that. So maybe they just want to drive everybody out and then bring in, this may be, as strange as it sounds, future, it won't be a good thing necessarily, but bring back industry later with cheaper labor. Drive break the backs of the people that have been there a long time and who have a certain amount of power, politically and otherwise, and sort of break down the whole culture for better exploitation, as if they're not already being exploited.
Well,
to the max.
If you believe we're going to have a third world war, then what comes out on the other side, especially as it pertains to the United States and probably North America, the world to come after that, it will be barely recognizable. If the United States sustains some serious damage, which I think it will, it's going to be just a new geopolitical, geographical construct. No doubt, Mexico will have its influence in here. I mean, they're going to erase the borders and just go ahead and do whatever's happening. And it's just not going to be the United States anymore. But be that as it may, there's also going to be places that are going to be left alone, and the Rockies would be one of them. The reason I'm going into all this is because whatever they're going to do with people after the Third World War is going to be something I don't even want to have to deal with. I will not be alive for that. And if I am, I'm going to be so gone. I'm lucky if I can find where my penis is, so it doesn't make a difference anymore. If I'm 80, who gives a crap what they're doing outside the house? So yeah, you're right. I mean, we lay a lot on Britain because actually they've been our watchdogs ever since they created what's going on, here in the United States. And I didn't really address what we were talking about before, but I said this on a show the other night. And that is, no, we never paid the Brits for the land grants and the funding of a commercial enterprise that was in their interests. And so that's the reason why we never, ever have been free, is because we never pay them off. We didn't win them in the Revolutionary War, so we're still their financial and their blood supply, which is why we got to fight their freaking wars in the 20th century after they got their butts kicked with a slight win over the Boers down in South Africa way. So so that's
that explains why our legal system is linked to the British legal system. And I remember you did some shows on that. Was it The Informer?
Yeah. Yeah.
Could you restate how that works? It's somehow at the state level, every state is controlled by an office that's a representative of the British Crown or something like that.
No, I get the two books here, and he goes through that with the state constitutions. And it's one of these things. I'm trying to think of an entry point and to get out of this without going through the whole 9 yards. Well, let's put it this way.
I can talk about Halliburton for a second. You want to mull it over?
No. I know why I'm having such a hard time with this. Let's just put it this way. We adopted the English code of law. So what's the big deal? Nothing really. And Iman traces that back now. He says it really goes back now that all law is under ecclesiastical law, which comes out of the Vatican. Also with that, it is arguable, and there's a book out there, and of course it's written by Brits, so if people have a problem with that, that's fine, but take a look at a book that's online, you can read it, called Sources of the Constitution. And there it talks about where the American Constitution got its influence, and much of it, again, came from Britain. Is that a big aha? No. I mean, we to this day, we still, like I said, observe the English code of law. You know,
they always make it sound like we based it on the Iroquois
they use that
Constitution,
right.
But that's kind of a just misdirection. I mean, even though it's probably somewhat true.
You know, or they used it too. I mean, you know, where the five nations up there, and after the French and Indian War, I mean, were they necessarily not exposed to Britain's influence? I mean, that was the whole idea of that war. And I'm not
so the thing where women could vote, was that an indigenous idea, or was that something the Brits?
Oh no. It was anybody that was indigenous, because that's one of the things that we talk about with this whole bit about our founding fathers being such good Christian human beings. It's because, well, no, not really, because they didn't want women to vote, they didn't want blacks to vote, and they really didn't want men to vote that didn't have enough land. So these people were not by any means commoners. They were elites who wanted basically to have elites run the show. It's not a representative government. Who the hell are they representing? So that thing is so fraught with problems. But, you know, of course, with all the propaganda and the movies and all that stuff that's gone on, we just think they're the greatest guys in the world, and they screwed us just like politicians screw us today. You know, that kind of person doesn't change. They're scumbags. It'll never change. It's always been like that.
The other thing that you and I were talking about off mic was Robin Hood, and that's kind of it's almost like the Brits co-opted a story that should take place in America with Robin Hood, because the timing of when he was, the earliest date for him is exact same date, 870 AD, that the Montauk Indians say that they came here. And so Prince Madoc, also rumored to be the brother of King Arthur, who was run out, would have been that person, and probably settled, went to Montauk, then went down to New Orleans and came up the Mississippi and Ohio. That's why you end up with all of these place names through there with Egyptian names and so forth, because he was Moorish, and that's why he was run out. And if you notice in some of the King Arthur movies, I watched King Arthur the other day, the most recent one, they do have his brother being dark-haired, curly, you know, with kinky hair and so forth. So it's in the story, but it's not obvious. And I'd have to research King Arthur more to really get to it, but I know Peter Moon makes that argument, and I think you said you had heard it somewhere about Robin Hood being the evil, the black sheep of King Arthur's family, because he was part black, driven to America.
No, you got me on that one. It might have, but
oh no! I remember you said you'd heard it somewhere, but you didn't.
Oh, I'm
know
sure
where.
I did, but I tell you what, I mean, you can call it senility or Alzheimer's or whatever, but I mean,
well, his name, Robin Hood, is a bird head name.
Oh, yes, it is.
Which just makes you think of Egyptian, whatever. And of course, what we're pointing at here is that the British Isles were settled by Egyptians, and that's really their heritage. And it explains a lot of the royalty issues they have. It's almost like the Pharaoh line, you know, just sort of continued on, up there. And that kind of also explains how they could be, the Holy Roman Empire's newest or latest incarnation, since there's so many links between the Vatican, and Masons, which are following the Egyptian religion, more or less.
You know what I think we're talking about here and to kind of organize it a bit, the history of people being here. All right, I'm talking beyond the native peoples. Okay, I mean, and in the end, there had to be somebody who came here first. I mean, I don't know that every place in this world, whether what it bears out in Scripture or not, was occupied, but then eventually occupied. So there was always somebody here first. I mean, I don't think that the world was created with people everywhere, and that's the way it went. But beyond the native peoples, and you know this, and we talked about it with other guests across the years, that you have some kind of old boy network in archaeology and geology and history, anthropology, whatever, that want history slanted a certain way and have really gotten their way. And then you hear people who come up, again, the old bit about suppressed information. You get people that come out, and there's also whack jobs in there too, so that's always a problem. But, I find that unbelievably interesting, that Phoenicians could have been over here, that Romans could have been over here, Egyptians could have been over here, Moors could have been over here, the Irish could have been over here. What actually went on? And what a shame that we never really know, all the cultures that came in here. And then when you hear this stuff, like I had said to Denton, I mean, we've talked about it too. Why, some of the Egyptian names in the Mississippi River Valley network going up the Ohio mostly. What about that? I've heard about, supposedly treasure troves of Egyptian artifacts and gold and such, like at the nexus or the confluence rather of the Missouri and the Mississippi, which is like the southern part of Illinois. But then I never hear anything else. And, it's like, is this coast to coast bullshit? Or is something going on? And no matter what, aren't we deprived of a very rich and interesting history of this continent before it was a thought in like even the Anglo-Europeans' eyes?
Well, there's clearly evidence. I was just looking at history of the locks and dams in West Virginia, because it looks like Indrid Cold had an affinity for these, and they talk about digging up artifacts when they were building the dams that were between 6,000 and 10,000 and 11,000 years old. So that valley's been inhabited since the Ice Age, and I think the only reason we don't find more evidence prior to that is just because of the flood that occurred when the thaw occurred. It just wiped out a lot of evidence. But you do have older artifacts than that being found in other parts, in different parts of the country, like Michigan. But there was a large population here from way back, and then I just think this Robin Hood story is just a later story about one wave of immigration that has been co-opted by the British, if that's what happened.
Well, here's the other thing too. I mean, nobody has ever recorded, to anyone's satisfaction, I guess, whoever anyone is, that Robin Hood really existed. So are we looking at a mythological figure? Or are we looking at somebody based in history but maybe made more mythological, let's say, with exploits? Or are we looking at somebody who didn't fit the bill of the kind of Anglo person you want to be, the good guy, which means was he of a different racial background? I mean,
yeah, the Brits are trying to walk a fine line between revealing. They clearly thought that they had settled this land way before 1492. That's in the. I can't remember the source now. I read an article, but there is clear evidence in some of the records that the British claim to have been here way before that, and that's Robin Hood in a way. But they can't tell that story because then it gets into the racial thing, which they don't want to get into.
All right, so you're now.
So and on the one hand, it's the basis for their claim on the country, and on the other hand, it's a sort of an embarrassing fact that they don't want to admit because he was black.
All right. But then, obviously, history has vacillated somewhat, but they've allowed it in the record. Of course, being a little kid and having grandparents that wanted me to know about, Norwegians and Swedes and all that. I mean, there was this thing about the Vikings coming across too, and they kind of like said, okay, yeah, that kind of happened. And I'm like, but I never understood, in school. It's like, teacher, if Christopher Columbus missed the whole damn continent and went to the islands in the Caribbean, why is he considered, the person that found this place when my ancestors hit it dead square? But then they'll allow that somewhat, although they'll still, give it to Christopher Columbus. And I think that's more of a Vatican thing in a sense than it is a Brit thing.
Yes, yes.
And then you hear about, Irish monks coming over. And then you hear about Phoenician galleys that supposedly, or at least I think the story was that a Roman galley, either existed or does exist to this day somewhere in the deep water off the coast of South America. I don't know, and there's too many people out there, like I said, with the coast to coast bullshit thing, that money the whole thing. And I really get pissed about it because it's like, there's a really great story here, even if it isn't as salacious or as interesting or whatever as, some hoodoo spinners are giving us. We're just missing out on the whole thing. What a shame. Go ahead.
The Brits are just the squeaky wheel. Their idea of, what they did in Hawaii was they built a ship with the Hawaiians and then had a party and then wrote up a treaty. And I don't know if they haven't read the treaty, but they either fudge the wording or something, and then they go back to England and say, oh, well, it's ours now. When the Hawaiians were just thinking, we're making a peaceful pact here not to fight. So the Brits will you make any agreement with them, and they'll just say, well, that means we own your country. And so they may have done that to some degree with us, but you have to, it seems pretty clear that they got the biggest piece of the pie when you consider Canada. Yeah.
Well, yeah,
as well as us.
Well, with a three-way fight for the most part for the contiguous United States, it's a French, Spanish, and British thing. Yeah, the Swedes were here and the Dutch were here. Okay, great, fine. If there's anybody else I missed, I'm sorry, but for the most part, that was it. And so the Brits wind up the winner mainly because through the United States, they blazed the way for the extension of this country, which is an east to west thing. So,
by the way, the name of Hawaii is Mokuana, Hawaii, which it's kind of a Ma word. Ma usually refers to Egypt, and Kwa is in Egyptian or in Native American, they mean the same thing, basically spirit. So the name of Hawaii kind of is hinting towards some of these same old connections. And the name for the Hawaiian temple is Heiau, which is very similar to Heyoka or the Yahoo that we've talked about a lot. And the construction of the temples where they actually did human sacrifice and then would eat people are Masonic in a sense because they do 100-foot exactly walls that are 8 feet high and 4 feet thick. So you have the 8 and the 4, which is the basic Masonic organizing ratio, you might say, other than something like the golden mean, which is 1 to 1.6, which is in the pyramid. And also, if you turn it upside down, it's 911. By the way, that was something I wanted to mention to you.
Yeah, thank you. But aren't we also involved with? I remember the golden mean, but then there's also the Fibonacci. What was it? The Fibonacci ratio or triangle. What was that? You remember that at all?
Yeah.
That's another numerical association.
But they also had 8 pyramids outside of their temples in Hawaii, which are made of volcanic ash, but they can make these nice pyramids or volcanic rock.
Well, there's another thing about pyramids being everywhere across the globe, that just not looking like those that are in the Monument Valley of Egypt.
The first American ship to sail to Hawaii was called the Lady Washington, named after Martha Washington, like 1790, which was right around, the time of the Indian Wars.
Again, yeah.
There was a big push. There's just these waves, these surges of activity you can see throughout history. Like 1848, there was a ton of stuff that happened. And 1947, it's just chock full of it just appears that there was some huge planning done after the war that pushed through all these crazy rollbacks of union. That was the year that they made it illegal for unions to contribute to political campaigns. They were trying to undermine the Tillman Act with the Taft-Hartley Act.
Well, obviously, the fear that they were trying to lay on people was the association between unions and obviously what they considered communist structures. What always cracks me up too is like when I hear about the wonderful victory of the workers. I mean, that, it's like, does anybody know that that never happened? But, I would think that would be to distance, people from, unions, somewhat linking the unions to, like I said, Bolshevik stuff, blah, blah, blah. And in a way it was, but, on the other hand, if you have an owner that sucks, and you got no other place to go, so what are you at the behest of the owner? I know.
Well, I think the best organizing principle for 1947 is this agreement made with the former Nazis. We're bringing them in. We're going to let them take over the intelligence apparatus. The operational side of the CIA was basically where they all went, and a lot of them went to NASA too. And it was almost like we just decided we're going to be like Germany now. We're going to, continue the Nazi program here. And so everything had to be changed to make that happen, because there were forces that had to be overcome to make that happen. And that's where the UFOs come in too, because that sort of fed into it. It got everybody really disconnected, I think. Once people start worrying about aliens from other planets, I mean, you've got them by the kahunas or whatever. But I wanted to say these Hawaiian temples, the alternate word for them are Morai. So there's a Moorish name in the name of the temples, Morai. And they were talking about the cattle. They were bringing the cattle for Hawaii in the 1790s from California and bringing them over. The idea was to make Hawaii a stopover point for all the British ships. So they brought citrus seeds from South Africa to plant so that they could have a place to recover from scurvy. But when I was studying the cattle part of it, there was a note in there about how Montauk was the oldest cattle operation in the country, Montauk Island, or Long Island. And that points again to that old Moorish settlement there, because those cattle were first appearing on Long Island in 1643. It's pretty early.
Yeah, and it would make sense too, because Long Island's another place that kind of just isn't like on anybody's radar screen. Like the part of Long Island everybody's familiar with is obviously not even what you would. It's it's not even Long Island anymore. It's one of the. It's got the western end's like the two boroughs. It's Christmas. What is it now? Queens and help me out with the other one, and Bronx. The Queens and Bronx are on Long Island. But the western end is right out there, as far out as Rhode Island. Not that far away necessarily from the peninsula with Massachusetts. So I can understand that easily. I mean, the eastern end of Long Island bears more of a resemblance to the Cape, or Rhode Island and such, than anything else. So that this happens in Long Island, I think is just absolutely, so interesting. But, what's left that hasn't been developed, in that section, in that area of the island. You
just mentioned the Cape, and it made me think of Cape Canaveral. I don't think I mentioned on air. here today about the Woody Derenberger police chief moving from Parkersburg to Cocoa Beach. Did I?
No.
That was a little thing I've been going through the Derenberger file. That the Parkersburg, West Virginia police chief moved to Cocoa Beach and became the police chief there. And the move was made about a year before Mothman started. And so once these contactees were being discovered in West Virginia and coming forth, they were being interrogated by NASA people, and Woody actually went down there to the Cape and was supposedly under the protection of this police chief. And then in the same file, I find a letter from John Keel saying that the police chiefs have all been targeted by the men in black, and they're being pressured to play ball on something, but no one quite knows what it is. And then Indrid was taking people to Joppa, Ohio, which is a Middle Eastern name, Hebrew name, which is near the Belleville Locks and Dam, near Reedsville. And so it's looking like Indrid had some connection to defense security or federal government monitoring energy sites.
Well, when you talk about police chiefs, you're not saying like across the country. You're just saying that if there were particular areas where something was going on, the police chief was a focal person to obviously gain the, cooperation from?
Yes. In Ohio and West Virginia. And then I noticed the Derenberger's speaking list are all churches in the Parkersburg area, which I find odd. There's a letter about how, there was a lot of speculation that Derenberger was being brainwashed from different researchers that were looking into it. And that's been dropped from the story now, these days. Keel says Derenberger is in the center of many strange events, but he is not necessarily responsible for those events. And then there's a Parsons, and the guy's name was Parsons, the police chief. And then there's a Clark who's discussed in the letters, which may be George Clark, the CIA agent who was controlling that psychic, what was his name? Owens. And he's come up in 2 or 3 places. One of the, I think, Men in Black witnesses in Point Pleasant was told George Clark was the name of, his name was, the MIB was saying his name was George Clark. It made me think of Jack Parsons, though, when they keep using this name Parsons, but I guess that's the name of the cop who was from Parkersburg. Just looking over this letter. Is there anything else?
Well, is the fact that, first of all, it's interesting that someone would leave. Well, in a way, it isn't interesting.
My next door neighbor married a guy from Cocoa Beach. There were Cocoa Beach connections in this story.
Well, the point being is that you can understand someone leaving the north to go down to the south. It happens all the time. To go from Parkersburg, I guess, somewhat on the, what would you call it, easily in the purview of the whole Mothman situation, to go down to Cocoa, which is, let's face it, in proximity to Cape Canaveral. What does that mean?
I don't know. I also wonder if this Clark that they're mentioning isn't Jerome Clark, the UFO guy, who probably was following the case. And Clark was known to hang out with CIA agents on some of his cattle mutilation research. So,
to bog down our conversation with a useless piece of Vyzygoth minutia, when I was playing with the Cocoa Expos one summer in '72. There were like 10 of us in this apartment building. It was horrible. It was just garden apartments. So since I was one of the last guys in, I got to sleep on the Naugahyde couch in this furnished apartment in the living room, whose air conditioning just could not compete with, truthfully, 7 guys in the apartment. So we used to open the door on the second floor, and it was miserable. Okay. So I'm laying on this naugahyde couch. Every time I turn around, the bolsters move with me, because they're sticking to my skin. And I remember thinking how much this sucked, even though I was playing minor league ball, And across, when I would lay straight, past my feet, out the door, I could see the gantries of Cape Canaveral. And I just remember that because the song at the time that had also been out by Elton John was Rocket Man. So I don't know. Like I said, a worthless injection there, but okay.
Well, you and Denton were talking about how the miners, the early German miners, could locate iron mines by looking at the vegetation on top. That's the same idea behind the cattle mutilations, is that, the animals eat those plants that are indicative of whatever's under the ground, and then that shows up in their muscle tissue. And there's a letter from Keel in this Derenberger file about the Great Circle Route theory. He noticed that the UFO seemed to swoop down from Canada and up from the Gulf, like over Louisiana, as if they were literally physical. Something was it was like a planned op. Send in some reconnaissance craft that supposedly we had hundreds of, these remotely piloted vehicles, which you can find on the web now, pictures from 1966 of these things that could fly around. And, but in addition to those, you had these very large helicopters that were, flying around and mutilating cattle, and also dogs and geese and chickens. And I'm not sure why they would, I guess they were just, because I guess they would kill whatever was there, because if it was eating that, the vegetation, it would serve the purpose. You could still, regardless of what type of animal it is, you could test the tissue.
So, but what's the deal with the cat mutilations with regard to, their dietary, pursuits being, somewhat dictated by what's below? I mean, what is that?
Well, the minerals leach up.
Okay.
That idea?
But I mean, if they're being mutilated, who they're being mutilated by?
Well, the oil companies, or the
right.
mineral.
Okay, I got you. Oh, are you saying that they're, in a sense, kind of like divining rods for oil?
Yeah. Well, for oil or anything, any kind of.
Oh, jeez.
Any kind of mineral.
So hence the big cattle in Oklahoma and Texas?
Did Keel, predicts, this is written in 73, he predicts that there will be a big flap in 78 that will last 3 years to 81, and that's exactly what happened. It turns out Earl Neff, who was in control of most of this Derenberger correspondence, lived on Pleasant Valley Road, West Pleasant Valley Road. Just looks like 2 blocks from that Parma, Ohio gas station where the Blue Orb was seen. We talked about. It was one of these provocations where they make people believe that, in something, believe that there's an ET event happening. And these big stories are usually fake, as this one was.
Do me a favor, I've not done this because I just kind of take this for granted, but given the fact that, in this last year or so, I've kind of done shows separate from all the Vyzygoth's Grassy Knoll and Beyond the Grassy Knoll. Why should people care about Derenberger? Tell them what he's associated with.
He was a contactee that came forth right the same week as Mothman, basically, when Mothman started being seen. And Keel thought it was significant, and I think he thought it was significant because it answered a part of the puzzle, which was, who are the men in black? And it seems like they were brainwashing these contactees into believing they'd had experiences with aliens. And so finding out who Indrid Cold was, it could be very important. And he's still supposedly alive, living in Cleveland. And that's Does that answer it?
Well, yeah.
But Keel said, there really were odd lights flying around on Woody's farm. No one quite knows. I mean, I'm still not, as much as I respect Keel, I also wonder, if he wanted to introduce more doubt into the equation about whether or not these were Nazi UFO. Because you can find stuff from the 70s in the magazines that clearly, there's articles like Nazi UFO Cold War spying, and then it's an article about some different people who were, encountered men in black and thought that they'd seen aliens and all this. And Keel echoed this at the various UFO conventions. He would go in and basically throw cold water on it, say that these aren't real extraterrestrials. I mean, he was he was very circumspect about pointing directly at the Nazis or the oil companies, but he did, he did in a roundabout way. But it really put a damper on the UFO movement during the 70s. John Keel can almost be single-handedly blamed for it because, as soon as the Mothman Prophecies came out in 1975, they had a problem on their hands. The UFO, the guys that are always claiming it's extraterrestrials. And, Jerome Clark was one of them. And so they were getting into these huge arguments at the conventions. And John Keel was ostracized and everything because he was killing the business. People buy books because they want to believe in aliens, not because, they want to disprove them. And so it took a long time for it to recover. And it wasn't until Whitley Strieber, in the late 80s that it recovered. So here's another author who's come out with a credible story that involves real aliens, and suddenly, bingo, we're back in business. And all the abduction guys came forward, like Bud Hopkins from West Virginia and John Mack and those guys.
Let me ask you this. How much, first of all, I don't doubt that with some of the UFOs we're dealing with something that is probably otherworldly, okay? But that most of the stuff is probably ours, or at least is being reported to us by the government or whatever as some kind of hoodoo to muddy the waters. How much do you believe of the UFO stuff is really predicated upon, if you believe this at all, I don't know, on something that really is, beyond our globe?
Yes, I think certain light phenomena, balls of light, are natural, and certain creature entities that people see are natural. And, it's partly hallucinatory, partly not, which makes it very interesting topic in itself. But I think, they figured this out. They figured that if they did have these really advanced reconnaissance craft that they had to keep secret, that they could play on that fact. They could play on the fact that there are real UFOs and mix theirs in with those real ones, and suddenly no one knows what's going on. And I think they came up with cryptozoology, or really amped it up more, and the reason you saw a link between Jerome Clark and Lauren Coleman, one represents UFOs, one represents cryptozoology. Those are two things that really don't go together, but as you can see today, their goal is to blend those with conspiracy, too, and make it all seem like it's just confuse everything altogether. But the first link in that was bringing cryptozoology in to the UFO world. And now they've even got something called cryptoterrestrials, which cements that even further. So now we have a good name that they can throw out, which makes UFO occupants seem like they're cryptids, just like Bigfoot.
My feelings on the matter, like, who cares? But the situation is this. some funky stuff went down after World War II in a lot of ways. And then you mentioned one that was just kind of parochial to the United States. But a lot of things went down everywhere. But just as it pertains to what happened here in the West, we know that there was an Operation Paperclip, another big secret, about the Vatican's rat line getting German scientists, SS, and other figures out of Germany and into the Western Hemisphere, either all or some to South America, maybe some that went to the United States, but no matter what, both South America and North America, most precisely the United States, had an influx of former Nazi personnel. And they would have had to have something special going for them to be secreted out. Now, we pretty much know that those that were involved in intelligence, most likely the SS, took the OSS and converted it to the CIA. Scientists maybe, went over to Area 51. But the thing is, nobody really knows what the Nazis were working on and how far advanced they were, and how much that was given legs over here in the West. And there's reason to believe, I would assume too, Andrew, that there was also a paperclip in a sense that took some to Russia. And Russia probably availed itself of some of the scientists and such in Japan. That was the spoils of war. We don't hear much about it, and I'm speculating with the Russo-Sino thing, but I don't know that that's such a stretch. But we don't know just exactly what those characters had done. And where we are now, and what we're not being told. Now, I've had experiences with UFOs and such, and the only thing I ever got me really kind of a little nervous were those lights that we were following from the Utah to Nevada. And we're reminiscent. What was it? The Marfie lights in Texas? Is that the right word? Marfie? What am I thinking of there?
Marfa.
Okay. I don't know. It was bizarre. And, there were two of us there. That was unsettling. What I saw in the skies, was interesting and certainly not anything I'd ever seen before, but at least, I'm thinking that's somebody's craft that we're not being told about. So,
Well, the creature entities are important, and because I think they are a threat to the national security state, because the creature entities are some strange phenomenon where witnesses are being given information.
But the nature of them would be what we would consider spiritual and somewhat indestructible.
And what? Disruptible?
And indestructible.
Yeah. It's funny because there's this understanding in the indigenous world. If you study tribes, and I may have mentioned this last time, forgive me if I did, but the tribes can move to a new place and figure out really, they ask the question, how can these natives know all of these intricate plant formulas for healing? And the natives say, well, we just, go into a trance and we ask the plants what to do, or we ask the animal what to do. And this is the tapping into the collective knowledge base of nature somehow. And creature entities exist in there and can help that along, I think. And that's why so much effort is made to spin. That's why we have cryptozoologists, I think. In addition to the fact that they use cryptozoology as a spying tool, which they have for a long time, at least back in the days when you had to physically go somewhere to get intelligence. They would use cryptozoologists who would claim, oh, I'm just looking for Bigfoot, when they're really trying to study a military installation in the area. And Dresser Industries is a company that supposedly has a cryptos team like this who are really spies, and that was a Dick Cheney creation. And I think it's under Halliburton, even, Dresser. I know they make gasoline pumps as well as doing cryptozoology expeditions. And did I send you that letter from
Somebody to Bush?
Yeah. It turns out the founder of Halliburton, Mr. Halliburton, was friends of Bush Sr. and Halliburton sold his home to Abraham Zapruder, who shot this famous film, JFK.
And, I know.
And,
hey, who sent you that letter?
Bruce Campbell, the JFK researcher out in California.
All right, you know him?
I've corresponded with him.
No, because I've wanted to come on. I think I emailed him once, like 100 years ago, and I never got a response from him. But I was always interested in that. When I saw that, and I saw that he was attached to it, although it didn't really say it came from him. Yeah, I've always wanted to talk about it because he's the one that was on probably the first time I read or I came upon the information that the handler for Oswald was what, the Morton Shield or something like that?
Yeah, and DeMoore and Schildt's wife worked for Bernard Gold, and in the photo with Halliburton is Bernard Gold. He knew DeMoore and Schildt.
But that doesn't really surprise us since it's a close circle of friends.
Well, it also means that DeMoore and Schildt, as rumored by Campbell and other posts he's made, knew George Bush.
Yeah.
Very well, and there's letters between them, right. Actually, and he knew LBJ. DeMoore and Schildt did, and I remember LBJ's personal assistant had dated DeMoore and Schildt at some point, or was dating him.
But the sum of it all is, as much as George Bush denied that he had anything to do with the CIA, he was very heavily involved in the CIA, and all these characters were involved to produce someone like Lee Harvey Oswald, who was an asset, and as I said, well,
David Ferrie was probably running the UFO ops, too. That's the thing, is that there's links between the JFK people, assassins, and the UFO stuff. And this has been, you can find this all over. There's lots of people talking about this. They never really get into the details of just how it hooks up, but it does. And I think David Ferrie might be or Fred Krisman, because Fred Krisman could be Indrid Cold. I think David Ferrie was in town. It's pretty clear that Ferrie was there, so Krisman may have been there as well. Go ahead, I interrupted you. Sorry.
No, not at all. It just speaks to a network that was very tight and, of course, under the radar screen, and was heavily involved in these. Well, they were the perps in the assassination of JFK. That was a time too, obviously, that the CIA was under the gun, and probably the resignation of Allen Dulles satisfied a lot of the powers that be. The CIA, I don't know, those people thought they ever were going to be disbanded, or if they were just smirking like, yeah, right, fine, you're not going to do anything to us, and they gave up Dulles and some others as sacrifice, which isn't unusual because you see Tenet being given up by the CIA to satiate people about 9/11, that things could have worked better if we had only known, which is all bullcrap because we pulled it off, but they gave up Tenet. So giving up Dulles back then, what's the big deal? And they're all Knights of Malta, so they're all in the program. It doesn't matter. They fall on their sword, but they'll be pensioned out, and they're not going to have to work another day in their lives. So in other words, the CIA, for whatever it was, which I think we can agree was a construct fortified by the Nazis that came out of Germany after World War II to give balls, if you will, to the OSS, of which one of my uncles was involved in. And I tell the story about how, when he used to get low, he used to say what we did was treasonous. I can only imagine what he meant. He didn't make the jump from the OSS to the CIA. But by the time I heard those stories, the CIA was definitely, well entrenched. It was part of the U.S. landscape.
Well, that recent movie with Matt Damon points out the OSS was really controlled by British intelligence, or, they learned their tricks from them. But one thing I wanted to say about Derenberger before I forget.
Yeah, by all means, go ahead.
Is that I think, he supposedly went to this planet Lanulos. And on the way to Lanulos, when he was on the, quote, spaceship, after Indrid did some, hypnotic techniques on him, On his way to Lanulos, he sees a rock, and that doesn't make any sense in the story, but it points toward oil companies. And then he gets to Lanulos, and it's in the jungle, and it sounds a lot like South America to me, and it's just, he's talking about the Bermuda Triangle in his book, Derenberger does, and Jonestown, I'm thinking this is Jonestown because it is right outside of the Bermuda Triangle. It's close to Florida. It has a long history of being Union Carbide mining area for like 100 years. Some rare minerals are found there. And that's the other significance of it, I think, is that it connects these same JFK players, UFO players, to Jonestown, which was an assassin training center by most accounts of knowledgeable conspiracy researchers. No one's connected that to Lanulos. I just think that that's probably what Woody was referring to. And it was a little more broad-based than just one guy talking about Lanulos. There were other people talking about it. And in fact, in this letter to Earl Neff in April of 1967, he says that there's a birthday party attended by Lanulosian children. What's it saying here? What about his daughter? Does she believe? He's talking about Tanya, Derenberger's daughter. I'm not sure, of course, that the psychiatric standpoint is the best one to view the case from. But without any supporting evidence for this wild story, conventional hypotheses seem preferable. What is he saying here? If his story is true, it will put more pressure on him to get some evidence from Indrid Cold that Indrid Cold and his merry men really exist. If false, it gives him more rope. Well, and then Derenberger married a woman who claimed to be from Lanulos, and left his wife and moved away. So that's kind of an odd, it makes this place seem more real in a way.
Well, that situation.
And Lanulos backwards is Salunal, which is a name that actually refers to earth energies, believe it or not. It's something about radiating shock waves. It was in a paper on radiative shock waves in the earth. So there's more to that name than we discovered. And I've even wondered if Lanulos, if you look at, if there's some, it almost has Jones in it. It's sort of, well, I'll skip that point, but, if you look at the different languages, that it could be a Guyanese language and so forth.
Well, let me ask you, was Lanulos somewhat, was there a description of the terrain? Was it tropical?
Yes.
All right. But, that was a CIA op. I got some information from Freak Lemon, who was in, he was in the service. I'll just say that. And in touch with a couple of people, and he sent me some stuff. And some of this is available if you dig deep enough. But most of those people who supposedly were poisoned to death were shot. Now, did you come upon that at all?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. So,
and they also had needle marks, most of them. And one of them was probably Grace Stevens, the woman who actually saw the shooter at the MLK assassination, claimed it was not James Earl Ray.
Right.
Was sent off to a mental institution. Her husband was paid off and brought before the grand jury, even though he was passed out and he was an alcoholic. His testimony was used to point the finger at Ray. And Grace Stevens, after spending several years in the mental institution, was taken under the wing of Mark Lane, who got her out. gave her a passport with a different name, and sent her to Jonestown.
You know, I just want to say this.
And Keel, remember, Keel wanted to get in contact with Martin Luther King and tell him he was going to be assassinated, because Mothman witnesses were telling him that.
You know, I'd be hard-pressed. Whatever Martin Luther King was or wasn't, I don't care. I'd be hard-pressed, though, when I see that last speech he gave, where he didn't know that there was a great likelihood that something was going to happen to him. With that whole bit about, you know, I may not get there, but, you know, it's like, he had
his mom was mysteriously murdered.
Who?
Martin Luther King's mother was shot in church, assassinated, and her killer had, I think, some connection to Columbus. And this is John Judge. I can't remember all the details, but he was connecting Columbus to Jonestown in some way, saying that there was an Ohio rabbi named Hill who was suspicious, you know, probably working for the government somehow, who went down and started Hilltown, which was right next to Jonestown. And Hilltown got all the leftovers from Jonestown after the massacre.
Yeah, I could see myself wanting to stay down there if I survived the first one. Oh, yeah, by all means, send me to Hilltown. Oh, geez. I'm not mocking. I mean, I just, you know. Yeah. But the thing is, with this whole situation that took place in the 70s, and that's all I wanted to say in an expansive measure. And I'm thinking about Dave McGowan, who I probably want to get a hold of. When you bring this back up, this bit about Jonestown and such, and in the beginning we were talking about Hendricks, and again, there's another figure that involves whatever was going on in the decade of the 70s, and maybe we should even say late 65 to 73. Somewhere along the line, that all got killed in that area. But I mean, all the people that were involved as pop culture figures, those who would necessarily attract the attention of adolescents and young adults, and how many of them had military backgrounds, all this kind of stuff. You know, Andrew, it's like I wonder myself, because I was like in it, and I'm not sure, and I would love to talk to McGowan about this too again, and it's like, what in the world, on a larger scale, what was done to us in the 70s, either wittingly or unwittingly, with or without the help of some of these pop culture icons? What happened to us then? I mean, you think about this stuff. I mean, this goes beyond the early 70s, like Jonestown in 77. You know, and get the assassination attempts on like Ford and all this other stuff, and Manson and all that stuff. Christmas. I mean, people talk about, you know, screw Jones and martial law and blah, blah, blah. Nothing still to this day even comes close to what in the world was going around all of us in the late 60s and the 70s.
I don't know. You know, I don't know if it's worse, if it's really less now in a way, because there's been some pretty audacious things that have happened.
Well, what
911 and
what about if I said it this way? And not that I have to conform this statement so that some way, somehow you'll agree with me. No, that's not the case. But and I'll say there's stuff going on now, but then here's what I thought. What if whatever was done to the population, the herd, especially the impressionable types, in the late 60s through the 70s, what if what they wanted, what if what they're doing today was predicated on the human behavior and what they could do to influence a herd back on the stuff they did in the 60s and 70s? Could we possibly be looking at today the fruits of whatever was being done back 30 years ago?
Well, it all points to do you know the popple seal has a bell on it, or a hive?
Yep.
It all points back to that. I'm just kidding.
Yep.
I just wanted to give you a dramatic answer. Yeah, I think you're right. It did. They were out to figure out, you know, how to manipulate us remotely. At first they started off with, well, TV. I mean, TV's really the best way, I think. Sorry, I have an airplane going over.
Well, at least it's going over. But let me expand that even more. What if everything that took place and as you said too, some funky things went down after World War II. World War II was a paradigm shifter without a doubt for almost everybody that was involved in it, and then of course those who weren't, and I mean nationwide and such. But what if everything that took place after World War II, of course, which was already designed by the social engineers, so that there was a blueprint, what if everything after 1945, so you're including the second half of the 20th century into today, was all a major, major script and plan to bring us to a point where probably if we have another third war, which I think we will, it will be that much closer and probably one final step away from the supposed global world order, where everybody will be like really happy and, we'll all love our masters.
I think of that symbol, the S, the S in SS, the sharply defined angular S.
Yep.
I'm joking again.
Yep.
No, but I did think of that, the S, for some reason it was at the end of Angels and Demons. That was like the symbol, a secret symbol. You mentioned the secret, agenda. And I am sort of going on a tangent here. That S was seen on the side of vehicles during Mothman that were going around and intimidating UFO witnesses. It was seen on a Volkswagen that was seen in both New Jersey and West Virginia that had West Virginia plates, that was blue, and had 3 men in it who were impersonating John Keel, Ray Barker, and Jim Moseley. Now, was this Indrid Cold? He drove a Volkswagen. I don't know. I wonder. I think it was. I think this was, a multi-state operation in a way.
But what were these guys getting done?
Well, they were carrying forth what you're talking about. They were trying out stuff on people. Can we just abduct someone and make them believe this, make them believe that? Can we use a device and point it at them? This is what is alluded to in 1966 in that ad I was talking to you about for the Harry Diamond Labs. In 1966, they're claiming that they can do things like this, which I'd have to pull it up to remember all the things, but it involved electromagnetic pulses, lasers, mind control, all the things we talked about. And Harry Diamond Labs is located right next to Mount Vernon, where George Washington, was raised. And, maybe that institute was involved. Battelle was certainly involved in tracking all of the UFO sightings, with a large computer database.
Who did you say, Mattel?
Battelle they put out the Air Force Blue Book number 14 on behalf of the government, and they used a computer. They entered all of the different UFO sightings in a computer to come up with what was essentially a watered down report.
Right, but just give me the first letter of that word.
Which word?
The first letter of. Are you saying Battelle like boy or Mattel like man?
B with a B Battelle in Columbus,
okay.
West Jefferson.
Okay. I got you.
Where they made the anthrax for 911, and where today Bill Gates has bought a huge plot of land next to it. He's got something planned there. Who knows what?
Well, if it gives employment to Ohioans, they'll love it.
One thing I'm working on right now, and I'm working on two things. I'm working on my fourth book in the Mothman line. So I'm working on that. I'm also working on a Gray Barker reprint, the Men in Black book that he did, which was his last major book. And one of the things he left two things out of it. So he's doing a book on the Men in Black, and he leaves out Indrid Cold and Maury Island, which he had already written about, both of those, in prior works. And this was sort of a compilation of everything. And I think that in itself says a lot. It says that he didn't want to I think the fact that those two are left out is that there's some connection between them. And that could be Fred Krisman. That's why I'm thinking Fred Krisman may be Indrid Cold. He kind of fits the description and knowledge base and so forth, especially if he was working with David Ferry. You know, they would have had a lot. And it also would explain people being jabbed with needles and all that, because that's what Ferry was into. You know, you were talking about all the mind control and stuff leading to where we are today, and I think you're right, and I think that even today, keeping that secret about the Nazis coming over, taking over the CIA and having these craft flying around, and continuing that experimentation is really so important that they're still pumping the ET disinfo out there at an even higher rate than ever before. Mm-hmm. It's still an issue. And that's probably why Barker didn't put it in there. He was afraid, even then, in 83, to, you know, fully come out with it. Mae Brussel had been one of the few already that had done that, and she ended up murdered with a needle, more or less, probably.
All right, so this, she was never accused of committing suicide. It was just perhaps natural causes, with perhaps quotation marks under unnatural causes.
Yeah, a sudden case of cancer, and her daughter was killed not too long before that in a strange auto accident by some guy who was military and who disappeared after the accident.
You know, she was into so much stuff, and I have to admit, every time, and I don't do it often, but if I were directed there, or if I were just hunting around, to wind up there and to read some of this stuff, and I'm like, you know, I can't dismiss it. I sit there and I go, you know, this would have been interesting. And of course, she's gone, and I don't know if there's anybody else who really can speak to her legacy or who knew her. But you hit it on the head. I mean, she's somebody who almost could be considered kind of like, you know, tinfoil hat conspiracy, but there's too much substance there, I think, to do that. I'm just sorry, you know, we all missed her.
Well, she was a turncoat, because she was born into the upper class and decided to do that kind of stuff, which is really not kosher.
No, not at all. That's a death sentence right there. But let me ask you something too. Do you consider Barker a credible source? Is he a good guy? Quote.
I think so. In a sense, I don't think he was a real agent of any kind, but you never know. But
amongst the people that you spoke to, and I mean, I know this is making things black and white, but you don't have to speak to it in that sense. But if people are listening and saying, okay, look, you know, I'm interested in what you're talking about, but where do I go, and whom do I trust or not trust, or even whom do I go to for information, and I'll make up my own mind. With the people you've spoken about on a rank of credibility, top to bottom, who would you say you would turn people to be probably the most accurate about this whole subject?
At the time, it would have been Keel, and the only caveat there is, since he's talking about a prior history of natural phenomenon, it tends to lean itself to some people believing it's more aliens, that it's more real than it is. Although he kind of explains that it's not extraterrestrial, you know, it's something else, ultra-dimensional. And it can be spun away from the Nazi UFO camp. But, you know, that's because Keel's work was edited so much, I think. It's too bad that they hacked it all up, because I think if the Eighth Tower and the Mothman Prophecies were put back together, that'd be a great project someday. I'd love to try that out if it's ever possible to make it all make better sense. I think he knew exactly what was going on. He wanted to let the message out, but he did it in code instead of coming right out with it because it was dangerous to do otherwise. He's definitely being tracked, monitored, so on and so forth. Barker is just more artistic. He's an English lit guy. So in his books you'll find fiction, historical fiction in places, but it's pretty obvious where those are. The chapters are actually written differently. You can tell when he's doing artistic flourishes, and then when he's telling some hardcore information about what happened, it's pretty straightforward. And I think those you can trust, as long as it's not something like the Richard Pratt thing, which was kind of a little joke with him. And I think, he was making phone calls and trying to stoke the fires. But I wonder who was more into that, him or Mosley. Because Mosley, in the early, if you look at Barker's early stuff in the 50s, those two were not on the same side. And Barker was often accusing Mosley of being a CIA asset of some kind. And then later, they became friends. And I wonder if Mosley's presence didn't, kind of make Barker look bad, more worse than he was. Because, Mosley really does have a tongue-in-cheek, has always had a tongue-in-cheek kind of approach to it. Andy's from the upper class. He would have more reason, I think, to be a player on the government side than Barker. And Barker was always more, I think, especially with his early UFO stuff, it was all pretty straightforward reporting of what was going on. So, Mosley started the Wanakee, New Jersey sighting hoax. Well, that's an interesting thing because he started it with a hoax, but then it continued on in some real fashion afterwards.
Well, do you have a date on Wanakee? Because I was there at the time, but I know that there was a Oradell and a Wanakee sighting situation. I'm thinking Oradell, boy, I don't know, might have been, late 60s. What about Wanakee? Do you have a date on that?
Yeah, it was late 60s or 60s, about the same time.
All right, so here's the situation. Wanakee was, at that time, was a little bit more underdeveloped. It was up in the Ramapos, same old mountain deal. And, okay, not at that day and age, that easily scrutinized by media. The Oradell situation was in a town called, it's in Oradell, and a little bit closer to at least the Bergen Record, which was a decent newspaper for which I worked. And it was one of the hole in the ice deals, and it seemed pretty credible. So here's a situation where you have two in a short span of time. One of them, which was really hard to explain, that the one that took place in Oradell. So, like you said, it might have been it might have been supposedly debunked or whatever. But then we have this other situation, probably maybe 15, 20 miles to the southeast, under a little bit more scrutinizing eyes. That would mean both citizens and the media. And so what do we do with this one? And there's never been, by the way, any kind of plausible conclusion or explanation. It just went away.
I would guess, we have to ask ourselves why we have Indrid Cold in West Virginia and then Indrid Cold in New Jersey or out on Montauk. And it could be because both places had something going on that was related maybe to the building of the UFOs. I mean, they had to store them somewhere, and because the Carbide's sister plant, the Institute plant in West Virginia, the sister plant for that was in Dora in Germany, which was the one that was reported to have been building the UFOs that Walter Dornberger ran. And he was supposed to be hanged at Nuremberg, but von Braun stepped in and saved him and brought him to Bell Helicopter. So they probably were keeping they actually may have been keeping these craft in the TNT area because they were moving out They may have been building them there because they obviously were using radioactive this or that for power of these craft, maybe. But there's obviously radioactivity in the TNT area. They're supposed to have been making parts for A-bombs. But since you have the sister plant of the UFO plant in Germany there, it makes sense that they would have transferred it there after the war. And that's why you were seeing all of the UFOs flying around TNT area. And there are all these underground tunnels there. By the way, they just had an explosion there a couple of weeks ago. One of the domes blew up. It was right where the TV crews, we always go to this one igloo. It's supposed to be haunted.
Right. I remember you.
It was on that same strip, that same row of domes. And it blew sky high. And so it just begs the question of who's renting all of these domes, for one thing. And then what's underground there? Because they just flooded all the tunnels. So
do you know they did that? Do you know that they did that without a doubt?
What?
Do you know that happened without a doubt?
What?
That they flooded the tunnels, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Can I posit a theory here?
Yeah.
All right. And I just want to state it for this time. All through the years with the interviews I've done with you, some other individuals who only came on perhaps once, some aside comments from people I never thought that it would come out of them because we were talking about something else. What it's done to me is create at least some kind of theory, like I said, where I look at the Northeast and probably, I would say no more further north than the Hudson Valley. And I would even say where, what is the storage? Oh, Iron Mountain. Iron Mountain that's on the east side of the Hudson River, not far from, I guess what town would that be? Hudson, New York. Down through New Jersey and Pennsylvania into Western Virginia and Virginia. You know, I wonder all that takes place there because along the way, whether, when I was talking to Denton about being up in the Ramapos, actually around Wanacue and in Byron's West, and seeing stuff and even plants I had no idea what they were, and I couldn't care less at the time, but I just wonder all that took place. And whether or not, like you said about New Jersey, I mean, you had some heavy-duty companies there like Lucent, formerly Bell, I guess a derivative of Bell.
Derivative of the Popple Seal? And the Mormons?
I'm not going to bite on that.
The Mormons are there, I think, to obscure the whole Moorish story by their interest in all the genetic records. They're keeping them covered up. Because Joseph Smith was really a racist. He called the Canaanites the eternal darkness upon the earth.
He was a snake oil salesman. Come on. Yeah, no doubt.
He was a Mason.
Huh?
He was a Mason who had infiltrated the Moorish communities.
Well, some people do studies on this.
They were looking for a takeover, I think, because they were in trouble, the Masons. Needed a new place to do their thing.
Well,
but I don't want to get you off track.
No, but I mean, take a look at the symbology in the Mormon Church and Freemasonry, and you make up your own minds. That's what it comes down to. But anyway, with tunnels, with testing places, it's almost like there was a playground, if you will, that extended from southern New York through Long Island, which you can relate to, down through New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and into Virginia and West Virginia. Just a whole lot of stuff went on in really just the second half of the 19th century, pretty much after World War II onward. And do we really understand what's all going on there? I don't think we do. But I don't think it's a stretch to understand why a lot of stuff got done in that area. And of course, it's proximity to Washington, D.C., but.
I think the DIA, Defense Intelligence people were probably involved in all this stuff. That would explain how it can cross over from services, because some of these guys had multiple, they'd have an Air Force badge along with a Navy badge, the Men in Black. So, you know, they have their security force, the DISC, which is the largest police force in the country, the DIA, I think DISC has a higher budget than the CIA, and the FBI combined.
But, you know, as you say this also, as we talk about all these intelligence networks and such, what I'm thinking about right now is, okay, look, we're going to come up against the end of something. If you believe we're going to be in a third world war, and I think it would be wise that one should do that, then after a while you have to ask yourself, you know, what are all these agencies doing? What are all these intelligence networks doing? I mean, how long can you go ahead and test and experiment and tap into? I mean, when does this finally have does it have a final payout? You know what I mean? It's like almost like they're all getting, to me, it's like a bunch of bees that are working in a hive, excuse that symbology, toward a final something or other. You know what I mean? This thing can't be ongoing without a payout.
Well, one payout, and maybe kind of ties into the whole save the resources for later idea, is that all the plastics, you know, the fact that they are putting plastic liners inside of canned goods that reduce sperm count, I mean, they could put a different formula inside these cans. You know, you're getting dosed every time you eat something from a can, especially if it's an acidic food like tomatoes. And we have, I think there was a study that said that we've got half of the sperm now that we did 50 years ago, men. So it seems like that's going to lower the population almost by itself if they just keep dosing us.
All right, so you're telling me that, and I rarely buy them, but I do once in a while when I don't want to crush all the tomatoes. I'll grab, you know, a couple of cans of diced tomatoes, crushed tomatoes, tomato sauce. When I look in there, I know there's a white inner lining where there used to be just the metal.
Yes.
That's what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
So buy in bottles.
What?
Buy all that stuff in bottles.
Oh, yeah, in glass if you can. Right, agreed. But that's very hard to do, but I understand where you're coming from. Absolutely.
Did I tell you I went to Mineral Wells recently on a trip back?
No.
That's where Derenberger and Cold met. Were you done with your thought, by the way?
Who cares?
Prior thought?
No, go ahead. No, go ahead, really. No problem.
Yeah, went to Mineral Wells. I think the Navy was involved in that whole thing because Walter Bosley has mentioned that his dad was Naval Intel, was living in Mineral Wells right there where it all happened. And I went to the cemetery there and noticed a lot of naval guys in the cemetery. And also in Mineral Wells, you have this large labor training facility. Training, I guess, I'm not sure who all they train there, but it's like a county facility or maybe a state even where people come to learn carpentry, whatever stuff, you know, all kind of, I don't even get what kind of place it could be. It sounds like an odd concept, but I guess back in the day, maybe they were using it to train the military guys coming back from the war, setting them up for jobs in the plants and stuff. But that's where all this happened, and that's kind of an odd thing. It makes me think that they were keeping tabs on labor, that Indrid was keeping tabs on labor, or Woody, maybe even. Woody worked at Carbide. There was a spy operation going on there in Mineral Wells to keep tabs on labor, because that was the big issue in 1966, was what's labor going to do here with this Carbide strike. And Parkersburg is right there, just, you know, less than 10 miles. And that has a long history. Parkersburg and Marietta. I went to Marietta, looked around. That's an old town. Mm-hmm. I can't remember all the crazy facts about Marietta, but the name itself is a Moorish name, and some of the other names around there are also. There's Masonic names. There's a cemetery in Marietta that is a mound. They took a mound site, like Denton was talking about. This is a mound that has a moat and a ring around it too. Well, it's a cemetery as well, and it's an old Masonic cemetery, specifically for Masons. And I don't have a note. Yeah, I wonder if I lost some notes on the plaque. It says that Ben Franklin personally came to authorize that lodge. And these were all Masons who had fought in, I don't know, certainly World War I and II, maybe older even. Marietta was founded pretty early, like late 1700s during the Indian Wars. Duquesne from France, he was one of the early founders. It was an important town. Because it's on the way to Ohio on that northern route through West Virginia that people used to go on.
Well, yeah, I mean, what was Duquesne? Was that formerly Fort Pitt or something like that? But when it was anglicized after? Well,
yeah, there's a note. Yeah, there's a plaque there that says he came on a royal trip, or maybe it was the Prince of France or something. I don't know. It was another one. There were two of them, and came there because it was so important for some reason, and then went to Pittsburgh overland. I guess they came up the Ohio all the way from New Orleans.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe it was harder to go upriver from there. Must have been that must be why he got off there, went overland to Pittsburgh. It got rough going there at that point on the river.
Really?
Yeah. Well, that's the only explanation. And then if you go on upriver, part of it splits off to Pittsburgh, the Ohio, and part of it goes on up into Pennsylvania and actually into New York. And that's where Joseph Smith was doing all of his stuff. So another place I visited was up there in Pennsylvania, where you lose the trail of the Ohio, sort of the left branch of it, and it all sort of the water seems to be coming from Conneaut Lake, which is there's an old amusement park there. And I was fascinated with that because I'd had a dream once that an amusement park would be an important piece in this. So I went there, and sure enough, they're remodeling the hotel. There's ghosts haunting it. It's now been on a couple of big shows on TV. And I met the owner and took a tour and everything. But I think that this is where those scrolls were found that I talked about, that would lay out, that the Jesuits had written, that laid out the history of these tribes that were in the Ohio Valley, that were mimicked by Joseph Smith when he did his tablets. So the Jesuits, the Catholic Church, had found out the truth about Madoc coming from Britain, if that's what happened, or Wales, coming up the Ohio, settling all these Egyptian tribes that wore headdresses and everything, had pyramids and everything. And then they were all wiped out after that. I think that's where the scrolls were found, because that fits the description, the very skeletal description we have. And it's a weird place because water seems to run north to Lake Erie through Conneaut Creek, and water seems to flow south to the Ohio. And that lake is it's almost like water from Lake Erie is all under all of that area, and it's coming up through this lake, and then springs are feeding out both sides of it. It's very odd. But this is where oil was discovered.
Yep.
Just, 10 miles away in Meade, and you go to Meadville.
Meadville, yep.
And you have stories about John Wilkes Booth, and they have an armory there with domes, just like the TNT area. The old, I can't remember the name of it, Redstone Arsenal, maybe, or something.
Well, that's what I asked Denton about too, because, J.D. Rockefeller he grew up in Cleveland after they kind of moved out of upstate New York. And, how did he get onto the oil thing? And the oil's birthplace is obviously northeast Ohio and northwest Pennsylvania. Meadville, let's not forget there's a town called Oil City, Sharon, And yes, that, I told you that Booth had bought, land parcels up in that section, understanding there would be an oil boom after the Civil War. So very interesting place without a doubt.
Greensville is there. That's where they've had some Mothman sightings, and the sightings seem to follow that Conneaut Creek all the way back down to Lake Erie, where Conneaut in Ohio is. So the creek runs back into Ohio that way. Meadville, I was fascinated by the old maps. They had an old map from the late 1700s. This is where the Erie Canal was coming through. There were canals that were part of the Erie Canal system.
That had been already pre-dug before they tried to create the canal system, the Erie Canal system? Is that what you're saying?
Well, Conneaut Creek seems to have been turned into it at one time, and now it's been covered up. So you lose, there's just a little stream now, but on the old maps it shows a canal there where Conneaut goes up north. So it's like parts of it have been taken back. They're covered up. But Meadville is very important to that whole system.
Well, what's interesting about the canal system?
And you had a railroad that went to Marietta from there and to Wheeling, so you could get stuff from there back to New York, or vice versa.
Well, it seemed that the building of the canals was going, and of course, this is the story, that a certain product or whatever you want to call it, entity is always at its height the day that it becomes obsolete. And I'll give you an example. Think about blacksmiths, and then the Model T comes out. Okay? Now, with canals, they seem to be the real big deal. We had them built in Jersey. You had them up in New York. You know that you had the system down in Maryland that flanked the Potomac, and they were already being dug and in place, and then bang, all of a sudden it seemed that all that stuff got abrogated because railroads became the thing. You know what I mean? So it's almost like they were being built, and those who were overseeing this or commissioned to do such were not availed of the fact that railroads were going to come in and basically blow them out of the water. Sorry for the verbal irony.
Yeah, for a while they were working together, but yeah, it diverged. Probably as oil became more plentiful, I suppose. I don't know.
Well, but also Morgan got ready. The robber barons, in the second half of the 19th century, started to gain power, and that is the story of America from that point onward. So what? Morgan had the railroads, and Rockefeller had the oil, and that's how they made their arrangements, so to speak, to monopolize and to maximize their profits while obviously getting rid or preventing any competition.
I wonder if the canals weren't developed for the oil business, and then when they figured out they could do pipelines the whole way, they didn't need them anymore. I don't know.
It's a possibility. That was the last available conveyance before they decided, that the railroads could do the job. Who knows?
But there were a series of roads in the late 1700s that are pretty mind-boggling. If you look at the map, there they are. They're the same roads that they're using today, and they're all over the place.
Yeah, so we would call them now.
Just how many thousands of people were living here before the Europeans came? It looks like there were way more roads than they're telling us.
Well, it's like we see now where the infrastructure for a subdevelopment is put in before any of the houses go up. It's like, why are we building these roads? There's nobody here, but it's for what's to come.
But I'm just wondering, how could they have had so many of these roads in the late 1700s or early 1800s? It doesn't make sense.
Well, could part of it be the fact that, at least that's...
Or did they build them all between 1800 and 1850? Is that what happened?
Well, you know the story, too. I don't know if it's mythology or not. I tend to think it isn't. That a lot of roads were put in for future growth that followed basically Native American, shall we say, traffic routes?
Yeah. I'm just thinking there were a lot of traffic routes.
I'm sure there were, more so than we're told about, no doubt about it. But especially in the Northeast, you see all the pikes, quote, pikes that were built and all that. And the interstates themselves, even out in the West, out by you. What do the interstates follow? But the Oregon, trail and that sort of thing. So,
I'm just looking at notes. I can, Did I get everything about mineral wells? It looks like it was one of the first gated communities, mineral wells. It's probably starting in the 70s, which may indicate there's a lot of the government was housing people there.
Yeah, they didn't want to be
maybe intel people or whatever. One of the names I saw in the graveyard was Deem, D-E-E-M, made me wonder if Demo Hassan, the name of Indrid's cohort, wasn't just drawn from that, the local name. Maybe somebody who was named Deem was calling himself Demo Hassan. I found this in the Anomalous 10 book. It's just talking about the difference, I guess, between real and synthetic events. These sound like real events, and they sort of point toward hallucinogenic experiences. It says 4 farmers saw a white horse swimming in the clear atmosphere near Parkersburg, West Virginia on 7/1/1878. Figures were seen in the sky over Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia in the fall of 1881, according to Scientific American. These medieval visions included white-robed figures in the night sky in Warrenton,
Virginia.
Well, some of them were in Warrenton, Virginia.
Yeah.
Just vast numbers of robed figures, and some fighting and some soldiers and strange things that were seen in the sky, which obviously can't exist, although I will say that I found an odd reference to an event that happened. I don't remember the date, but there was some kind of inversion layer where the people in Rehoboth Beach could see Ocean City, Maryland in the sky upside down. This is well documented. So maybe these are those kinds of things, but they appear to be things that are coming from a different time zone, time and period.
Yeah, but I mean, an image like
that.
It's
a little Parkersburg thing.
What?
That's just a little. Parkersburg and Marietta have had lots of strange paranormal things for a long time, including Virgin Mary sightings and that sort of thing. Go ahead.
No,
There's
I mean,
3 rivers come together there too. That makes it especially important as a sacred area, probably inhabited for thousands of years.
Where's that confluence?
Where's that?
Where is that confluence that you're talking about?
Parkersburg, Marietta, Parkersburg, West Virginia. That's where Blennerhassett Island is, where Aaron Burr, set up his little compound.
Right. And what else? There's the Ohio, and what else?
I think the Little Canal runs in there, and then one runs in from Ohio. I don't remember the name of that one.
All right.
But Ohio topography is very strange. It's hard to figure out why certain rivers are running certain ways. And maybe it goes back to the Ice Age and how it sort of scraped across, and it sort of stopped right about there. Around Marietta, eastern Ohio was saved a little bit, where all these Mothman sightings and things have happened, was not destroyed by the Ice Age. And the Indians that were living on the edge of that line, I forget the name of this line, but it's where the glaciers kind of stop. They were called the Cole Indians, C-O-L-E, and I visited a mound site. There's several around Columbus. And they have a drawing there on the wall of how these mounds could have been built, and they're just claiming outright this is how it happened, is that an Indian family would live in their house. When someone died, they would leave the body in there and burn it down, and then cover it with dirt. And then the kids would build, or I don't know how they organized it, but probably the kids built another one right on top. They died, house was burned, their bones are in there. They keep doing that until it's a huge mound. And they had a stela, which is a stone carving that was found in the area that was very unusual. It looks Buddhist, and it's kind of similar to the symbolisms we've been talking about, where you have the 4 divisions of a circle, like the Buddhist mandalas have, and you see so much in Indian iconography, American Indian, and you see it in all these different occult and Masonic places too. That stela sort of points toward that, and no one really knows what it means. There's a lot of questions about these Indians. So I don't know. Maybe that's why, the Marietta Mound graveyard has a mound in it, because it was, that was sort of how they built the mounds. I don't know. Some mounds don't have bodies in them, so I don't know how that theory applies to all mounds, or just the ones in Columbus. You want to talk about April, or?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sure.
I'm going with notes. April, the middle of April is always exciting, and usually have some big stories that are, the bad news comes out, and then the distraction stories come out to cover up the bad news. And this April was no exception. My notes are a little scarce this year just because I've got so much other stuff going on. But we had the underwear bomber pled guilty on the 12th. That's the guy from Christmas time, had the supposed underwear bomb. On the 13th, an Everett man here was said to be plotting to kill cops. So that's how many cop killing stories that we had coming out of this area recently. I mean, it's like the sixth one, isn't it?
Yeah.
WAMU, a tape showing a decadent WAMU party from 2006 was released because they were starting to get into those hearings on what to do about, the current hearings that we're still hearing about, which aren't doing anything, it appears, anything significant as we expected. On the 14th, there was an earthquake in China, and there were flames seen over the Midwest. Now, and there was the Iceland volcano started going off at the same time. Now, I'm putting all these together. I don't think anybody else has, but I would say that those are all related tectonically.
All right.
China earthquake, volcano starts spewing, and flames over the Midwest could be this phenomenon when you have earthquake activity. And it usually occurs in the area of the earthquake. You can see balls of fire, electromagnetic activity like that. But it's very reminiscent of the Chicago fire. The cow knocking over the lantern was really a ball of flame that was seen all over the Midwest. It was this strange phenomenon where the sky was almost on fire and just caused massive fires all over the Midwest. For some reason, they don't want, that story isn't credible enough, I guess, or something, where you don't hear about it much, but it is actually what happened. And this was kind of the same. Now, I don't guess we'll get into whether or not earthquakes can be synthetically caused.
Well, we trust.
I think they obviously can be.
Of course, yeah.
And I find stuff all the time that points toward that technology being developed a long time ago.
But also, if we're trusting Orwell, for what he wrote in that book inside a book when Winston Smith's writing, there's that unbelievably packed paragraph that talks about what will come. And easily we see so much of it already has happened, boring machines and submarines and all this stuff. And one of them was, and machines that can cause earthquakes. Hello? So if he's writing about this in 40 something, late 40s, the book comes out in 49? It's the old story.
Tesla had figured that out so much earlier.
That's right, exactly. There you go. No, so of course they could.
But you got to keep in mind now, this all happened the day after Chase, which is now WAMU, was embarrassed in the media. And then the next day, on the 15th, they have that whole story about the Russian kid that was sent back from Tennessee because he was a bad kid.
Right.
That sort of covered up the bad news about Chase for a couple of days. It was also the day that, this is unrelated, but I heard that in Arabic countries on Thursdays, homosexuality is okay. Have you heard of that?
Okay, great.
They were calling it Man Love Thursday in the media. The Teabaggers came out hard on the 16th.
Oh, wait. I mean, after the story on the homosexuality, they came out hard on the 16th? Okay.
Yeah, the Teabaggers are coming out hard.
Yeah, you're killing me.
And that's directly conflicting with the bank hearings. So the Teabaggers are out there raising hell just to get you off of the bank hearings, I think.
That's it. You got it.
Goldman was found to have a conflict of interest on that day. That was when they went after Goldman. So, you know, this is our classic week where shit starts happening and other shit starts happening to cover it up. Obama says he wants to go to Mars on that day. So, you know.
Well, a lot of people want to send him there.
Huh?
A lot of people want to send him there.
On the 17th in Whatcom County, there's a bestiality whorehouse was discovered. This is in Washington State.
Oh, man.
There seems to be a bestiality thing up here. There's every kind of decadent, corrupt thing you can think of up here.
This isn't the place, too, where the kids are, like, punching the cows out and hitting them with hammers and stuff?
I don't know that much about it.
No, that's sad enough that I heard this. That was discovered somewhere, too.
But just to tantalize us, on the same day, the 17th, the Pope met with his victims, the pedophilia victims. Afterwards, some said they were touched.
How do you mean that?
That's a joke.
In an inappropriate way?
On the 19th, Goldman announces a $3.3 billion net in the first quarter. Since they're, they just threw it out then because I think they figured no one would pay attention. There's so much other weird stuff going on. Because the very next day, on the 20th, you have Clinton coming out and saying, oh, remember that militia terror that was so strong when I was in office? It's back. The militias are back. It's exactly what you and I were predicting would happen under a Democratic president. And sure enough, that's the day that the oil rig blows, Hitler's birthday. So you have Clinton wanting you to think about militia terror, and yet you have what looks like sabotage on an oil rig that's going to destroy the economy of the Southern Rim. I mean, it could be, this is the thing that John Judge liked to talk about was the Southern, or Mae Brussel actually, the Southern Rim economy versus the old establishment of the Northeast. Sort of a continuation of the Civil War. Reagan and Nixon were of the Southern Rim variety. I suppose LBJ LBJ. Bushes and all those folks are, in the opposite camp, Bush and Rockefeller and so forth. A woman was busted on an airplane for applesauce on the 21st. That kind of gets your mind off of the oil rig disaster, I suppose, for those who wanted a diversion. They could worry about what happens to them at the airport. Do you know in Europe you don't have to take your shoes off at the airport like we do here? Oh, only in Britain.
Oh, by the way, also, well, okay, go ahead. I'm not going to do it.
On the 26th, Stephen Hawking warns us that extraterrestrials may be bad. They may not be working in our best interests.
Oh, that's a scoop.
The oil is still gushing out as this is all happening. And then the Arizona immigration law is signed on, this is Monday, following week after the oil rig. I think that whole thing is designed to keep us, you wonder, could an Arizona legislator be influenced by something that happens in the Gulf? I don't know, but it certainly seemed odd, the timing. That now everybody's talking about the immigration thing. What do you have in Seattle right now? You have people protesting the immigration law. They're not protesting BP. And BP has a pretty big presence here in Seattle.
Well, I mean, where has everybody been for so long? And the reason I say this is because, they rotate stories every, sometimes maybe it's a couple of months. So here we have recently North Korea is the bad guy again. And so now we're doing the North Korea freak out. So, I mean, sometimes, I'm not sure, but they just rotate these stories. And you're right. Something else gets swept under the rug without a doubt. But this whole thing about illegal immigration, man, we have not heard a thing about it for about a year. And now it's got itself back in again. And it's like, okay, so what happened in the last couple of, you know what it is? Andy, I'll tell you. I'm driving home today and I'm laughing at myself. I'm going, you know what? Whatever happened to all the SUV rollovers? Whatever happened to all the Goodrich tire blowouts? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like all these monstrosities that took place and had center stage in our minds through media, then they go away suddenly, somehow, some way. They just go away.
Including the missing $3 trillion from the Pentagon budget. That was the day before 9/11.
Well, they just go away and everybody forgets about it. It's like, okay, so is there really a problem? Like, for instance, let me give you something really updated. Are all Toyota cars not going out of control anymore?
Yeah.
You see my point?
Yeah.
So now all Toyota cars are okay. Come on. Anyway.
And the oil business and the car business are very closely tied. So, you can almost assume that those are benefiting the oil companies somehow.
But it's just that they run the freak out by people and they keep it high and everybody gets all into it and then it fades away. Like the North Korea thing. It comes around about once every year. We do the North Korea bad guy thing.
Speaking of that 9-day news cycle you were talking about.
That's John Bonanno. Yep. Okay. Yep.
That ties in with the Vatican because they have a 9-day sealed mourning period after the Pope's death. I just noticed that. I don't know if it relates.
Objection overruled.
Church has, and I made a note under there. This is from Angels and Demons. I was making notes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, let's talk about that.
The church has 4 pillars, which matches the Masonic thing that we've been talking about. The 4 pillars, the chessboard of reality, the 1111. And there was some quote, the Vatican was destroyed by light from the Illuminati. The Illuminati was trying to shed light on the Vatican, which is why it was called the Illuminati. And there was this battle early on between the church and the Illuminists, and there was something called the Purga, where 4 Illuminists were killed. I don't know. I just made a note. I thought you might. If it doesn't trigger anything, don't worry about it. But I think with the Illuminati, the reason it kind of ties into this Birdman symbology is because they use anagrams in these secret societies, which is why you can talk about Lanulos and then do it backwards and try to find clues because they put them in there for you. But it's that creates a winged symbol. What's the word for that?
A bifurcated or
biradial or no. Anyway, symmetrical on both sides means you can go backwards or forwards with it, and that is symbolized in bird wings or moth wings.
Bilateral?
Bilateral, yes. And there was a moth thing recently. They're claiming that moths are ruining the Napa Valley wine, by the way. And then there's another note on this page. Manson was a program contactee because he had contradictory New Age and fascist programming. This was something that Keel talked about in relation to some of the UFO contactees. And Manson was in West Virginia right when they were really pumping. They were, in the years following 1947, when they were really abducting a lot of West Virginia residents for UFO, programming.
By the way, and I think I misinformed you and then corrected it, or you caught it.
Manson's always talking about UFOs, by the way. Go ahead.
No, it was Sarah J. Moore is not up in Mount Marcy. It's from it's up in Mount Marcy, isn't she?
Right. But on the 26th, getting back to that calendar, that was also the day that finance talks began with Obama and the banking industry. So suddenly you have UFO story, Stephen Hawking, immigration, racial issues starting. On the 29th, I've got Laura Bush was trying to claim that George had been poisoned at a party in which he had rubbed the back of the German ambassador. Did you ever hear about that?
Oh, when he did the little, oh, wait a minute. We're not talking about when he did the little shoulder noogie on the German
yeah,
prime minister or whatever they call him.
And her book came out that week, and she said that he was poisoned. That's why he was acting like gay or whatever.
Poisoned by what? Jim Beam or Jack Daniels?
I guess some intelligence operative. Of course.
Oh, give me a break.
Look, we know that George has this history. You know, he was a cheerleader, a Yale cheerleader. How much more gay does that can you get?
Georgie boy was a cheerleader?
Yeah. How more gay can you get than being a Yale cheerleader?
No. I'm not going to get involved in that. No, wait a minute. There's a lot of male cheerleaders these days, which is because they're in acrobatic teams. I'll tell you what, you wouldn't want to say that to them. Anyway.
Well, I know I wouldn't. I wouldn't.
They whoop you upside your head. But the thing is, Georgie was drunk as a skunk. I mean, this poison stuff is baloney. His old man hurled on the emperor of
But there's been this, there's been various little things through the years about George being maybe playing for both teams. There was the married couple that claimed that he was subjecting both of them to sex crimes. And then the wife ended up dead of a gunshot wound, and the husband. Hey,
listen, if you're a bonesman, I don't doubt it. Because that's how you get to be a bonesman, by the way.
Supposedly he slept they have to spend the night in a casket with bones. And supposedly he slept in with the bones of Emma Goldman, which he had stolen from her grave. Another rumor about George. Prescott supposedly slept on the bones of Geronimo.
But listen, I mean, if you go on the internet, if you go on YouTube and go, George Bush drunk, I mean, it's laughable. When he grabbed Schroeder, I'm surprised he didn't give her a feelie. Honest to goodness, I'm surprised he didn't. That was such a grammar school thing to do. You know what I mean? God almighty, you don't touch another head of state, let alone give her a noogie. Oh, jeez.
On the 30th, the media story was Bush's image is up because of Laura's Bush. Laura's Bush.
There you go.
Sorry about that.
I'm not.
All right.
She comes out with a book, I didn't kill that kid. Yeah, you did. The vehicular homicide, remember that? She comes out with this, catharsis, who cares, Laura?
That was also the day that Larry King came out and said that, what was this? Are UFOs, are aliens a danger? He started talking about aliens being a danger as well.
Oh, jeez. Larry King. I got to work on my Larry King impressionist. I'll do that sometime. Well, never mind.
The next day, May 1st, was the Greek bailout issue, $14 billion, supposedly.
Where did that go, by the way?
The British and the American banks trying to take over.
But you see how fast that disappeared?
Yeah. I mean, I think the goal here is to crush, because I think Americans are they all seem to know now that the Europeans have it a lot better than us, the European workers. And I think that they're going after the European workers as fast as they can to get them down to our level so that we won't have anything to point to say, hey, we want 4 weeks of vacation. We want this and that. And then the solutions they've come up with there, like in the Netherlands and in Germany, their solution to this crisis that we're sort of going through was to lower the amount of hours people work. Rather than firing them for healthcare reasons, our problems are all linked to this healthcare cost problem. Because over there, they could just lower people's hours and afford to do that because they have a proper healthcare system. Here, they have to fire everybody to lower that bottom line and then overwork the remaining people, which doesn't really help them in the long run as a company. Because the benefits of doing it the European way are much greater in so many different little ways, keeps the company in shape for a comeback when the economy gets better. They still have their employees. They didn't have to retrain a bunch of people and rehire or hire new hires, On the 2nd of May, New York car bomb, fertilizer bomb thing, you know.
Oh, what a joke.
That whole fake incident.
This guy had to go over to wherever he went to, Pakistan, to know how to, like, build a dud. I mean, this is unbelievable.
On the 4th, a Russian leader was abducted by aliens. He claimed he had been abducted by aliens. And I remember the article is so interesting because the Russians were treating it like a straight-up spy operation. Oh, he's saying he was abducted by aliens? Well, let's check into his background to see if he was brainwashed. I mean, I think the article actually used the word brainwashed. So there's evidence right there that governments know what this means if you're coming forth with a UFO story, that you probably have been abducted and information was extracted from you. And so now they're probably grilling that guy over in Russia to try to find out what it was what beans he spilled during his UFO encounter. On the 5th of May, we had the Somali pirates back fighting with the Russians.
Oh, I missed them.
Yeah, a Russian ship had a run-in.
That's good. I'm glad to know they're still going.
Then we had the big fat finger stock drop, which probably is really due to the Greek situation, but was blamed on somebody typing in the wrong number.
Are you trying to draw some connection between the Greeks and fat fingers?
Well, maybe not so much the Greek. I mean, the real problem is the speed trading that's occurring every second, instantaneously, automatically. Using computer programs, so it sets up situations where that kind of stuff can happen.
You know what I think they did? I think they started to get people prepared for major drops and then telling them, don't worry about it. And then one day we're going to wind up and find out oops, the whole thing crashed. Yeah, and I wonder what effect that will have on us, because usually good stock market news doesn't mean anything to your average citizen. Yeah, because they don't have.
It usually means your lot is getting worse. So will that somehow benefit us, do you think?
No. What will happen is dumbheads will still keep putting money into their 401ks, believing in all this shit. This is what we're looking at right now is a sucker's market. I'm sorry, but it's a sucker's market.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
When they bring out that asshole Kramer to tell people, oh, it's a good time to get in, and then later on they came back when they had a really bad employment figure come out, and he was like, well, that's bad. You know, Jim, shut up. We don't need you to do this stuff. And these assholes who follow him will go down to the pit of hell without him because, of course, he's invested somewhere else. No, the point is that they're getting people ready for this stuff, that all these precipitous drops, no big deal. It's no sign of something other, coming that will be worse. No. We're going to look at a really big, let's call it what it is. It could be a crash. And all that's going on here is telling people it's okay, stay in your 401s, most of which, the mixture of the holdings they have no idea, and they're going to get destroyed again. No. So, no, that big drop and then coming back and telling everybody it's okay, you watch. This is going to continue for the rest of the year. And remember, we are in the 80th year anniversary wise of the 29 stock market crash. Now, maybe it won't happen. But it's going to happen, and it's going to happen within the next couple of years.
Yeah, in 2012, there's $700 billion in corporate debt that's due based on derivatives trading. That supposedly will be the death knell for whatever is happening.
Well, pick whatever you want. I mean, this is all a shadow show. We're all fooling around. We're just trading computer bytes, and that's all it is.
There was a Citigroup connection to that fat fingered event, though. I remember it got mentioned, and then I didn't hear anything about it
yet.
Oh,
say it isn't so.
Yeah, so Citigroup had some involvement. That was also the next day, the 6th, was when they tried to put a cap on that oil well. It didn't work. On the 7th, we had an E. coli breakout in Ohio on lettuce, and we had the Times Square package scare. Yeah, so there were 2 of them? Was there 2 Times Square? The first guy with the car. Wait a minute. Did I get that? There were 2, right, in New York?
I really don't know about 2.
Well, I think there were, and the second one was just not as whatever. I think it was something else.
But did you see the Times Square cop that leveled a bicycle rider and found him innocent of brutality?
I did not.
Well, that's the other thing I'm thinking about Times Square. Yeah, these bikers come through, bicyclists come through, and they come through, and they were protesting something. That's fine. And so some cop is walking from that famous triangle we all are familiar with, looking south down Times Square, and a cop is moving to screen right to left, and some kid is like not really sure where he wants to go, so he tries to keep going left, thinking that the cop will pull up and he'll go around him, and the cop gives him a forearm shiver, knocks the kid off the bike onto the sidewalk, screws them all up, and the cop is found innocent of excessive force.
Well, he didn't know that the guy was going to fall into the pavement.
Right. And how do I know he couldn't take a forearm shiver? By the way, I just want to interject this too, because now we are into like the environs of like the current thing. As we're doing this show a little bit after 6 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday, here is the headline from WCBS New York. Anger grows following leak fix failure. And what they have is one of their graphics is this big demonstration and some cat holding up a sign that says, "Stop the oil, heal the Gulf." So you know where this is going to go, man.
More crackdown.
More foreign oil. And you know what cracks us up? And that is, so many times they talk about spikes and drops in oil, gas prices at the pump. And where you would think that this would be catastrophic for gas prices, they're going down. It is the beginning of the holiday or summer season, rather. We have this catastrophic flow in the Gulf, and gas prices are going down.
It is unusual.
Yeah. And the other thing is this. What they're saying is they're afraid now that they're not going to be able to stuff this thing until August. And that goes back to what Denton was saying. Denton was just thinking out loud. He wasn't making predictions. But he said that there is some thought that this baby, and we just talked about it, Andrew, is going to have to blow itself out before they can do anything about it.
Yeah, it's going to be 2 months before they can drill up that other well. So it's definitely 2 more months, I would say.
All right, wherever you are, if you're in your basement, also wanted to say to you, you heard from some information source that Florida's freaking that it could get into our aquifers.
Yeah.
I don't see that.
Well, let's hope it doesn't happen.
But are you saying it was going to get into the aquifers through dispersals that were going to float into the surface water?
Yeah, the dispersants break it into small particles.
All right.
Which makes it not float on the surface. Then it goes down, and then it can travel, and then it could potentially go through the coral itself, because the particles are small enough, it could work its way through the coral reef and under Florida and come up in the freshwater underneath.
Yeah. Can you tell me who came up with that little scenario?
No, he was on Tom Hartman, but I didn't catch his name.
Yeah, well, he's an asshole.
Tom Hartman?
No, whoever gave that. I mean, that's fear-mongering. I mean, if this happens and that happens, yeah, okay, fine. You can create any of those scenarios, but they're not realistic. So, I mean, that's just fear-mongering. And, of course, obviously, alternative radio and patriot idiot listeners love that shit. But, no, ain't going to happen.
On the 12th of May, we had the Impossible Planet story. Some impossible planet was found. This is another one of your reversal stories that, once, and the same day Obama said he was going to step up troops in Afghanistan, so I think the idea was to remind us, and I think that same thing happened before when they had the planet that spun backwards. That was an Obama surge announced.
So what you're saying is every time they want to send more troops in, they don't want to tell us, they'll hit us with some kind of...
Yeah, they'll have a story right next to it that
pulls you away.
That makes you think that things can be backwards, and it's okay. And it's okay that if Obama wants to do the opposite of what he said,
Oh, you're saying that there's something even more nefarious about these stories, and that is to actually rewire the thinking process that is going backwards as forward.
Yes, as you read the day's articles, there'll be one or two in there that have little signals for you how you should interpret the other stories. But
don't you love this, Andrew? I mean, I know that's a poor way of putting it, and as we are on this Memorial Day weekend, but especially, and that is, we have voted for Obama, he'll take the troops out. We all knew that was bullshit. And now, more are going in, and somehow, some way it's okay because the Democrats who were yakking their balls off when Bush was in office are now placated that their guy's in, and their guy's doing the same thing that, guess what, Georgie did.
Yeah, and even worse in some cases.
Yep, accelerated.
On the 13th, we had a Venezuelan gas rig in the ocean sink. Kind of an odd that it would happen so close together. The Russians killed 3 that were supposedly involved in the March Metro blast in Russia. So they took down 3 guys, claiming they were the guys.
No, they could do much better than that.
An article is floated, are there too many Ivy Leaguers in the Supreme Court? And then things, I don't have much for the next week until like the 20th, and they had Draw Muhammad Day. They had Rand Paul introduced to the public with his stirring up stuff to talk about on the talk shows.
All right, let me ask you this, okay?
While the oil rig is leaking, we can talk about Rand Paul. Go ahead.
2 things. One, are you okay with that name? What is Rand Paul? I mean, are you okay with that name? I'm not.
I don't know. What you mean symbolically?
No, it's just a douchebag name. I mean, isn't it Rand Paul? What the hell's Rand Paul? It's just, I know his father's Ron Paul, but could one of you guys have a 2-syllable first name? Is it possible? Like, Bartholomew. I know that's more than 2. But you know what I mean? It's like Rand Paul. It's like, it sounds like a machine. Also, what is with his hair? I mean,
he and Blagojevich should get together.
Well, Blagojevich has a 65 Beach Boys do. Is that a carpet? Is that a tube?
I kind of like the guy, even though he's a total jerk.
He is, but at least he knows it now, and he's going to make a lot of money on it, and he's getting out of government, which is great.
Yeah.
But I mean, no, he's definitely on the money. But is that a rug? Are you telling me he's got a tube on?
Oh, I don't know.
Stop! No, that looks like real. No, Rand Paul, that's a problem. It's a problem when your hair is straight and it gets curly at some point. I don't know. But I mean, again, like, get a new name, man. I mean, what's wrong? I mean, are you a Randall? Did your dad name you Randy? I can understand that. But Rand Paul. And then he ran his mouth. Sorry for the pun again. He ran his mouth about, I guess affirmative action, which of course a lot of, white Republicans are down with, and I understand that. But now he's already got to do, control damage for running his mouth. And you're in Kentucky. What a great place.
The 20th also saw an Arkansas cop murder.
You won't touch that.
Murders. And Thai explosion in Thailand of it, protests.
You're not linking those two, are you?
No.
Okay.
The 22nd, Obama pledged to West Point cadets that there will be a new international order, and a female officer was attacked in Seattle. And that's about all I have on the calendar.
By whom?
Two guys who got away.
Okay.
That's about all I've got on the calendar. I've got, I could blast through my notes and try to grab a few that look interesting.
Well, I can hit with a few.
What's that?
I can hit you with a few.
You can hit me with a few?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, for instance, now, because we have this election coming up in November, which is one of the minor ones, but still in all, you're going to be voting for federal officials, Congress people, senators. What I have to laugh at, and of course these people will never win, the ones that come out first. If you come out first at this point in time, it's like trying to fight a fight too early. You're going to get punched out. You're going to go away. And probably that's, I think, sometimes scripted so that, you send these guys out, whether they're Republican, Democrat, or independent or whatever, and you see how the public reacts, and then you throw them to the side, and then you bring somebody else serious in as you get closer to the event, which I would think would have to be sometime, in August or whatever. Okay. But I have to laugh because now all the clones have been told, if you want to win an election, okay, and you're going against an incumbent, what you're supposed to say, I'm not a politician. Okay? That's the big deal. That means you've never been elected before, and that's a good thing. So if you're going up against an incumbent, you say, I'm not a politician. However, in the Vyzygoth lexicon dictionary, when somebody says, I'm not a politician, what are they, Andy?
A Jesuit?
A politician. You're not listening. Okay. All right. So there's no such thing as not a politician. If you're running for office, you're a politician and by extension an asshole. The other ones also who are incumbents are making it clear they do not want to be associated with Obama. So when they run, they definitely excoriate Obama at every turn. So you have the newbies who want to get into the system saying, I'm not a politician. That's catchwords. And then you have those who are fighting for office telling everybody they're not for Obama. And it's like, it's so clonish, it's so redundant, it's so scripted that people even fall for this shit. I'm amazed. But you know what? They do. And I listen to all these promises, and I just keep thinking of the crowds that yell, Kazinga, which is like African for bullshit. And I'm like, oh man, we're going to do this again? Okay, great. All right. Now, what did you unearth while I was ranting? Oh, is that it? Okay.
Well, I've got several pages with one or two things on each one. Where should I start? I'll start with this food item. I know you like food items. MRSA is found in a third of pork farms today, and it kills more people than AIDS. And guess who's come up with the supposed
antidote?
Buckeye International, which may be an outgrowth of Buckeye Steel, because Buckeye Steel kind of disappeared, got reorganized under the name Buckeye International. Now, if you look up Buckeye International, you get this pharmaceutical company that's making MRSA products.
That's all in the family.
So that's, yeah, interesting, very interesting. After the passage of health care on March 30th, there was a militia roundup in Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana. I'm thinking this was a signal for the teabaggers to stop because they had been inflamed and sent out to do their work. And that was a signal subconsciously to just stop. You've done your duty. The idea was to sell the health care bill. So they created these teabaggers who were just out of control, which caused all the moderates to vote to support the bill. And the bill itself is not working in any of our interests. I mean, it was a very clever way to sell it to the middle class and to those of us who have any brains. You send the righties out to just raise hell like they don't want it. I mean, the righties love this health care bill. What's wrong with it for them? The ones with money, And those are the ones who are protesting. You get my...
Yeah, I do. But I mean, no matter how this comes down, it's going to suck for the little people.
On March 12th, we had the vampire pipe bomber in Seattle. Guy thought he was a vampire.
I like the style. Yeah.
March 24th, a guy claiming to be a werewolf hunter and also a chud hunter, which are humanoid underground dwellers. He was brandishing a sword at a hardware store here in Seattle and got arrested.
Let me ask you something. I mean, a lot of weird stuff goes on in Seattle, and of course, as you know, part of the series Millennium emanated out of Seattle. What are you guys doing there that we should know? I mean, seriously, what is going on in Seattle?
I don't know. It could be the rain.
Well, now you know why I want to move to Spokane. I'm not going to Seattle. Screw that.
I'm going to start just rolling.
Go ahead, do it.
500 hours of L.A. news footage from a news station revealed that only 8 minutes per hour of 16 minutes per hour was news. Only 16 minutes. And less than 2 minutes of that was in the public interest.
Yeah.
And of that, it was mostly entertainment, news, and legal cases.
Yeah, and gossip, yeah. Mm-hmm.
The guy wrote a book called How to Help Haiti, Pierre, said that Bush froze loans to Haiti, this is Bush Sr., putting pressure on Aristide supporters and messing them all up, and then would set up the current situation where foreign governments, by embargoing them, we open them up to further exploitation.
Are you talking about Daddy Bush?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and so when they had the earthquake, we're kind of there because we're responsible. We're running the country. And also, they had an earthquake on March 11th in Chile, an aftershock after the big one before that, and that was during the inauguration of the new president. It's kind of odd that it would happen right then. There was the Chief Dan Leonard, who I've been on a couple shows with. He's an investigator of the Skinwalker stuff. After they put out that video where they claim, if you watch the video, it looks like a dark entity coming out of the ground, very similar to what I saw when I was a kid. They're saying that this black thing can turn into a Skinwalker, like it's an emanation of an elemental entity from the earth. It sort of looked like oil, and it came up and flitted off. And they had a video of it, and they said at the time, and I don't know if this was all some kind of setup or what, but they were saying, this is dangerous for us to put out. And then within a couple of weeks, Chief Dan is in a car wreck where they dump a log out in the road in front of his car, and he almost gets killed, but he's okay, and he gets out, and then he feels like he's been shot with witchcraft. Now, and this is one of the Navajo witchcraft things is that they've figured out, and this is kind of backed up by physics, quantum physics, is if you can intentionalize some molecules, like if you can think in your mind about an eventuality, you may be able to project that into other people. And this is what the skinwalkers are said to do, that they can literally make an object shoot into you. And Chief Dan is reported to have said that that's what he thinks happened, because he had an operation the next day where they took some unknown material from his abdomen. So that's just an update on, his theory was, and this is going to be in my this is going to be in my 5th book where Chief Dan talks about his theory is that the skinwalkers are, real witches on the reservation who are now hiring out their skills to Germans. That was specifically
Germans?
Foreigners he mentioned were Germans who were coming in and wanting to learn how to do this to people. So, there you go. And I met this lady, I've talked about her, I think, Patty Rowe, Mothman witness, said that she predicted the Silver Bridge collapse before it happened. And I'm wondering if this isn't Jane Payrow. Probably isn't, but I just noticed the strange name. Jane Payrow was a woman that psychic that Keel was in contact with. Patty Rowe, if you just put P. Rowe, it sounds like Jane Payrow's last name. But Rowe's story connects the Silver Bridge to the Mothman very directly. A lot of people don't think that there's any evidentiary, evidence that there's a connection. But her story does connect it, which is that she interacted with Mothman and then got a vision about the bridge collapse and the packages on the water, and this may be where that whole thing came from. She claims she was mind controlled by Battelle as a kid. She was an orphan, was given to a family who mistreated her and sold her out for these government experiments. So it also brings Battelle into the picture as well, her story. I wonder about the whole thing. The modular housing scam, do I want to get into that? I know somebody in Columbus through somebody else who has a modular housing company, and they went under, and they were approached by a guy who supposedly sells oil on the black market, who's on the FBI wanted list, but who's somehow still running around doing financial deals, said that he wanted to help them start their company again, and he was going to get them a new loan. And then in the end, I think he used their company as collateral and got the loan and then ran off. Now, modular housing makes you think of Halliburton, because that's kind of what they're doing. A lot of what they're traditionally known as capping oil wells company with concrete. But now they've gotten into housing and all this other stuff for the military. And so all of these emergency situations like hurricanes and so forth, modular housing is what is needed most of all, and this whole industry has cropped up. And I know another person who bragged to me that he was a contractor who bids on emergency contracts from FEMA and then doles them out to other contractors. He's totally a middleman. He doesn't do any construction at all. He's just selling the contracts.
Yep.
Solvay, I saw my first Solvay advertisement on TV last week. Solvay, is a German IG Farben drug company that started a long time ago. It was 27, I think. It's another one of your IG Farben babies that is getting stronger.
Right.
They have a real presence in Mothman country, and of course the connection to Pope John Paul and all that. There was a Mothman segment on Monster Quest, which people talked about for a few days. There was a guy in Sacramento who said he saw a Mothman on a bridge. There was a guy in Wisconsin who said it floated in front of his car. He also said that people were getting sick in town and everyone felt like they were being watched. This was the sighting that supposedly occurred before the Minneapolis bridge collapse. This was a white man, looked like he was white. He had an Indian name, Awohali, and also on that show, they had a Chad Marsalek of University of Minnesota who said the memory is affected by emotion, which creates high confidence. But so if you have a memory, but the memories themselves are prone to be incorrect. So most of the time, memory of an event that you witnessed is off. But the more emotional it is, the more it creates a feeling in the recipient that that they can be confident in it. When in actuality, it lowers it, and it creates something called the weapon focus effect, which is like if you're having a gun pointed at you, all you're going to notice is the barrel of the gun, and maybe the hand or the face behind it, maybe. And that this is maybe what is happening in Mothman sightings, where people can only remember the red eyes because they're so freaked out by what's happening that they can't focus on any of the other parts of the creature. And in the description of the show, on the History Channel description, when you went to click on the show, it said, as a description of the show, it said, the monster is blamed for terrorizing a town in West Virginia where a bridge collapse claimed 46 lives in 1967. So, that's that thing I've talked about where they just want you to believe that Mothman is killing people and doing this and that. Eagle trapping at Disneyland. There was eagle trapping going on at Disneyland as not a ride, but an event. You could watch people trap eagles. Walter Bosley, the guy I mentioned, whose dad was in naval intelligence in Point Parkersburg has written a book about Disneyland and all the occult things there, linking it to Stanford Research Institute and all this stuff. Well, there's something in the Navajo called the Eagle Pit Ceremony where they trap an eagle and feed it a piece of meat, and as they feed it the meat, they give it the name of a person who needs to have a spell put on them. And this is supposed to be one of the most effective means of witchcraft on the reservation. It's supposed to, like, the person withers away and dies slowly over time, but they use an eagle to do it, and the meat has to come from the house of the person who's under attack. And I don't know if that has anything to do with the cattle mutilation stuff. Are they using the meat from these samples to do this kind of thing with? But, there's a bird symbolism involved. It's sort of like people using Mothman or a Birdman idea for evil. The change in gravitational field, there's a change in gravitational field, which is magnetism more or less, when any particle is detected. So if you're looking at a photon, it will change the gravitational field simply by being observed. And this is what might play into this shooting of witchcraft. Buna S is the name of C4, more or less. It's the stuff that was being made in Institute. So they may have been having these UFOs in one part of the plant, and in the other part they're making Buna S, which is synthetic rubber, which eventually was used in C4. Buna S is sort of the trade name. I was marveling at its similarity to the word bonus potty, which is the name of the Garuda in Indonesia. And bonus potty is it's like a birdman spirit that can actually appear in other forms, like, what was the other one? The barong. The barong looks a lot like the Garuda mask, but it doesn't have teeth. And it's more dog-like, which gets back into this thing where some Mothman sightings looks like it has a dog face, some like a bird. The dog face is actually, the barong is an emanation of bonus potty, which is more bird-like. And you'll see bonus potty on different swords, Chris knives and things from Indonesia. The Chile earthquake supposedly shifted the Earth's axis. I don't know about that. On 9901, this is 2 days before 911, on that Dean Radine's experimental site, a user saw an airliner and a log or branch suggestive of the Everglades falling between two tall buildings past rectangles or checkered patterns, which looks like the World Trade Center. They saw a tall industrial chimney and then a peacock, a native headdress that looked like a peacock, and then volcanic ash plume. And he thought that this was significant. And it was in the billions. I mean, the likelihood that all of these psychic messages would drop, ideation involving terrorism dropped before 911, way more than it had in any years before or after. And he calculated it was in the billions, that could be a random coincidence. Somehow people knew that it was going to happen and were changing their patterns of thought. Speaking of which, that magnetism thing, there was a study that came out recently. They could change your feelings about intent using magnetism. And so the thing that separates adults from kids is that adults can think about intent and use it to play into a decision about whether someone's guilty or innocent or whatever. We take it into account, but the more basic your mentality and more teenage or whatever, it's less likely to look at intent. And if you can apply magnetism to an adult and revert them back to this state where they don't consider intent. And that's how morality is affected by magnetism. I'm not going to really apply that to anything. Canova, the name of Canova which is where Manson's uncle was from. That's a Khan word, Canaanite, ova, so it means kind of womb of duality or creation. There were Indian mounds there. There's now an amusement park called Camden Park, named after a Rockefeller oil guy who mowed down the Indian mounds and put the amusement park up. And it supplanted Luna Park, which had been in Charleston. The Mothman in Mongolia is called the Kongarid. Sound familiar?
No, not really.
Han plus Ge means earth, and Re, id. Re, so these are all Egyptian names, and just about every single Birdman name can be traced back to an Egyptian meaning. Khan, what would that translate as? The duality of the earth and sun, or the creation of the earth and sun. So the name of the Birdman is really usually linked to earth, to moon and sun, and that's the name of Lanulus. You can see that it could mean backwards Sol and Null. Sol and Lunal is like saying earth, sun, and moon, and so someone chose a good name when they chose to call it Lanulus. What else? Mothman is a first responder. It's just a meme we need to put out because they're always trying to imply that Mothman is doing these mutilations. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I think the idea that he's a first responder is a much better way of looking at it, because I think the mutilations are being caused either by industrialists or occultists. And then these creatures show up to try to, I don't know, what they're attracted to the energy or the emotion of the situation, perhaps. Like if Manson really burned down the schoolhouse on Woodward Drive, and if Sarah Jane Moore knew about that, that would explain why neither one of them are talked about in the neighborhood. That they're like, it's like there's a thing about it. It's like people don't really want to admit it. And I don't think it's just that they were criminals, because West Virginians celebrate criminals. Jesse James is really big in West Virginia. My cousin lived in his house, and that they were, people loved it, thought it was, just think he's great. But they don't stick up for Manson. And it may be that is why, and that may have created all the strange sightings that occurred where that school had been. On 3/6/10, I probably already said this, March 6th, Ahmadinejad said that September 11th was a big lie. Oh, here's a good one. Morocco. On Earth Day, are you there?
Yeah, I am here.
All right, good. Morocco, on Earth Day, they had an AP thing about Morocco and how in 1786 they signed the first treaty with us that we, as a country, ever signed. And this is sort of hinting at the Moorish connection, the old history. They were the first country to recognize the United States.
Well, did we go flying in there in 1809? That was the first, extra United States activity that was undertaken by anyone. I think it was the Marines that went in against, the pirates in Saharan Africa.
Well, I think we as a country bought our first land outside of the United States there and built an embassy, I think.
Okay.
And so they're our longest friendly country, ally. Washington wrote letters to the leader of Morocco, George Washington. In 1821 was when we purchased land there, and Thomas Jefferson had some relationship with them.
He had a relationship with everybody.
Yeah.
But, I mean, when you think about the Marine hymn song, from the halls of Montezuma's at the shores of Tripoli, hello? Is anybody getting that?
Computer hacking has come back into the news because that's the new terrorism that they can sell. They were talking about, you've got Richard Clark, trying to say, you know, hacking can cause blackouts, air disasters, pipeline explosions, railroad finance problems. And then I've got down here that the Navy 10th Division is the one who operates on the web, and the 24th in the Air Force does. But the 25th is the newest one, and that's the one that may be operating out of that 1111 Independence Avenue. Oh, did I ever talk about the secret word? I know we've talked about the secret Masonic word, but did I ever mention I figured it out?
I don't know, but if you did, why don't you reprise it right here?
It's like, how could I sit on that for like 5 months? I did. I don't know why. No, there was this phrase was written. I think it was at one of the Jack the Ripper. No, what was the other? The one in England. John D. Was it John D? Anyway, it was written on the wall at one of these. I think it was Jack the Ripper. Yeah, Jack the Ripper. Jubilo, Jubilah, Jubilum. The 4 Jews will not be guilty of nothing. That was scrawled on the wall at the Jack the Ripper site of a murder. And it was brought up in a special about the history of Freemasonry.
Okay.
Okay, if you take the difference of all the 3 words, it's O, Ah, and Jubilo, Jubilah, Jubilum. That equals Om. Or the Buddhist word from the East, the Oriental word, which I think is the secret word, because that is the secret word of the Buddhists as well. And then that explains some of the stuff, it's a symbolic crossover, that it's a blend of East and West that is the best truth, I suppose. I think that's kind of the secret message. And the 9 has tried to do that, even though it's a British intelligence operation. They try to pull the Tibetan ideas into it, and place those ideals onto this orbiting platform that we should somehow worship or something. The Kachina clan, the Kachinas are these birdmen. Well, they're not all birdmen, but they're dual entities that operate in the Hopi world and the Navajo too. That's very similar to Cochina in Spanish, which is pig. And there's a whole thing with Christ and pigs that Peter Moon went into, how our blood was changed somehow by pigs, and this was a messianic kind of discovery that may have involved, the bringing out of the different tribes from Egypt to the rest of the world. There's some symbolisms. Anyway, the Kachina is known as the God Impersonators Clan. And the doppelganger idea is really big in certain secret societies, like in Africa, the shamans are all into doppelgangers, creating their own, and the Tibetans do it, and apparently the Native Americans do it. And I guess a skinwalker could be considered to be a reverse of that, like, the devil impersonators. For best control, this is just a little note to myself, for best control, have a society where opinions and ideas are modulated by economic effects. Some information about pot coming out. Pot together with certain frequencies can trigger non-local consciousness, i.e. hallucinations. They're actually touting this in a positive way in the marijuana press.
Well, aren't we getting a situation where we understand most of us are at least a little bit, if not sophisticated, so therefore we understand it's going to get freed up to be a little bit of an industry, and then what are we going to do? Demonize that and everything else? I mean, it's like, reefer madness all over again.
I'm almost done. Here's another note. Tri-State Airport. It was linked in the Kentucky Bluegrass book to Venice Beach in Florida and the 911 hijackers?
You're talking about the Bluegrass conspiracy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Tri-State Airport in Huntington was linked to that in the book, and that's where, very close to there, is where the plane that disappeared that supposedly hit the Pentagon, which morphed into a missile somewhere along the way, that probably landed at Tri-State Airport because, this book is saying that 911 planning was tied to that airport. The same players who were down there helping plan 911 were involved in that airport. So that makes sense.
But understand also, too, for people that day when they brought these planes down, this was a never-before scenario, although it did happen in 62, but that was because everybody knew there was a drill going on, that this is the first time since 62, which was not heralded to have, to be a situation where airports everywhere, at least in the East, were bringing down planes left and right just to get them out of the air. So it was an absolute fiasco. So you're right. That air strip could have been used, not a problem.
In Java, they have a bat creature called the Athol, A-T-H-O-L, which sounds somewhat like APOL, the entity talking to John Keel on the phone.
Or Rand Paul.
In Spain, there's a Catalan feminine dragon called the Vibria.
The vibrator?
Yeah. In Cameroon in 1932, Ivan Sanderson claimed he was attacked by bat creatures called the Olatiao. Here's a quote. Reagan's trickle-down plan created a nation of peons. Did I already say that once?
No, but thanks for throwing that in.
Little quote. Discordians. The Discordians were, of course, messing around the JFK thing. They had somebody in Garrison's office running off their stuff on his copiers.
Oh, copier, that's right.
So I made a note in here that the Discordians were co-opting Illuminati conspiracies on behalf of, who knows, maybe the Rockefellers. Can't remember what. I must have discovered a link between Thornley and the Rockefellers and forgotten to have written it down.
Oh, just like you.
Yeah. But clearly those Discordians were, some kind of operation coming out of the government. There's a movie called Max Payne which had some interesting Mothman-y symbolisms. They had these Birdman creatures. They were sort of like Valkyries. They were waiting for you to die where they could sort of sweep you up. But they were being controlled by this occultist with pharmaceutical links, and there was a blue liquid that everyone was sort of fighting over. I think the blue liquid was supposed to make you a better soldier or something, but it kind of put you more in touch with the Valkyrie Mothman things. They had a logo for that company that looked very much like Iron Mountain. There was in the story there was a Morris guy who knew the truth about the whole story, but he never was. Everybody in the movie was white except for him. It just stood out as maybe being some of these symbolisms of things we've talked about. The guy who ran ASEER, who was sort of had allowed all this stuff to happen, was named Colvin in the movie. Sometimes wonder if people who write these things don't search the web and find stuff in the Mothman story to sort of rip off.
Sure. Yeah, I can understand that, yeah.
I mean, I don't know. That's what happened there, but here's an old saying. He who speaks the truth often talks to himself.
I'm accused of that all the time.
Oh, and there was a movie about the ADM scandal that I talked about. I was talking about Port Ancient in Ohio and all the Masonic stuff around there, and the town of Morrow, which has mounds and all this stuff, and how their only famous person from town was Mark Whitaker, who had been caught in this Archer Daniels Midland thing, which interestingly, after that scandal, that's when Archer started pumping all the money into NPR to clean up their image.
Yeah.
The scams involved really basic ingredients for all foods, like amino acids. And so it just drove everybody's food prices up, which benefits everybody in Ohio because that's where a lot of food companies are. Well, Matt Damon's in a movie about him. It's his latest movie called The Informant. Yeah. Have you seen that?
No.
It's funny. He does a good job. He plays, Whitaker was a great liar. And it's just about how he fooled the FBI. He fooled everybody. He just had this complicated scam going where he stole, millions of dollars and then spent some time in prison. But he's sort of a folk hero there now in Morrow and Mason, Ohio. So that's all I've got. I've got, other stuff, but it's not that pertinent. So you want to ramble anymore? Or?
Well, no, just to say this week, and also as we speak again, it's getting worse with this oil.
I just before you that thing about the Logger branch suggested of the Everglades in that vision of the guy who was sort of visioning 911. Do you think that relates to the Southern Command? That they were maybe in charge of it?
Honestly, no, I don't know. But that Southern Command is here down in McDill, at the very south end of Tampa. Are we talking about the same Southern Command?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. And I think a lot of people in Tampa don't realize that what's going on in the Mideast is coming right out of McDill. Would that be unsettling for a lot of folks? I think so. So nothing's really said. Once in a while I'll see activity coming out of here with your basic black helicopters and such, but I can't say anything untoward. I've seen a whole lot more stuff happen in years gone by. But, no, I don't know, Andy. I don't know. The only thing I was going to also add, though, the Gulf, you're going to hear information now that the leak is going to go on until August, which I think, in a sense gives, more credence to what, Denton wasn't saying was the case, but just wondering out loud. And, as you said before earlier in the recording, that, this thing's going to have to just blow its wad, obviously, until they can finally do something about it. What'll happen afterwards, Lord only knows. This is, really interesting. Also, the one thing I wanted to get out here is that they did a consumer expose on supplements. And I saw the guy, I guess in the FDA, I have no idea, it might have been the GAO, who was giving testimony in front of the Senate subcommittee involving this. And the guy was just like so smarmy, like, boy, I had the goods on all these assholes. But, the companies they went after, if they're companies at all, or whoever they went after, obviously these are low-rung outlets. And it's the old story of like, okay, so you took the lowest common denominator, and what are you saying? You have to control this industry because what? They're all like this? No. So we know where this is going to go. Another step closer to FDA and pharmaceutical control over supplements. But that's the way it goes. That happened this week also. And I want to say something to you. If we can end on a little bit lighter note, the Super Bowl for 2014 has been awarded to an outdoor stadium, which henceforth will be called Meadowlands Stadium, which is not the Giant Stadium because that's been torn down. Meadowlands Stadium, the home for the Jets and the Giants, football Jets and Giants, is going to host the 2014 Super Bowl, which, by the way, folks, happens in February. And this is an outdoor stadium in the Northern Tier. You are somewhat of a sports fan. Have you heard about this? And if so, what's your take on this venue?
I guess it means they're going to try to build a new stadium.
Andy, they already built a damn new stadium.
It is?
No, the stadium's already being built.
It doesn't have a dome?
Well, you see, this is the thing. This is what fans, and when I was back in Jersey, and they left Yankee Stadium to find a new place to play, the Giants did. They came across the river into Jersey, and they built the Meadowlands Stadium without a dome. All right, we can forgive that. Now they're going to build a second stadium that's going to house the 2014 Super Bowl without a dome. What is it about New Jersey and New York that can't find their way to building a retractable dome? So what is this set up? Here's where I'm going. What do you think about this scenario? We could have the Super Bowl being played in a freaking blizzard, or if not, maybe like single-digit temperatures. Isn't that what everybody wants to come out and see?
There's some conspiracy behind this. There must be.
Well, I mean, is this going to change the course of American history? No. But just the fact that they would do this and they're inviting all kinds of problems. I mean, if this to me, a third grader could get right. Why are we going to do this in a place where it could really suck having to sit outside to watch this thing? So anyway, I thought that was interesting. But the stadium that is just being built, yes, there'll be a new one. It has not so far got a naming right, so they're just calling it, instead of calling it Stadium X, which they probably should do, they're just calling it the Meadowlands Stadium. But they're looking for naming rights, and that'll be interesting if nobody jumps in on that, because that'll be a sign of the economy as well, if you know where I'm going with this.
Well, I have been briefed on their pain.
How's that?
You know that old saying, I feel your pain? Well,
yeah.
It's been changed to, I have been briefed on your pain. No, that was a joke of some kind. I don't know if Obama really said that or not, but it was a joke.
Oh, really?
Someone attributed it to him when he went down to the Gulf to say to the people, I feel your pain. It doesn't sound real. Could he really have said that? I've been briefed on your pain.
Presidents say that shit all the time. You know, I mean, it's like kiss my ass. You know what I mean? It's like they come out, they throw these sound bites off. It's like, thanks. Like he went down to the Gulf and he was scooping up some oil. And it's like, okay, there's your photo op. Now go home. I mean, not only him, but everyone else, George Bush and the whole 9 yards. I mean, they're all royalty. You know, they don't give a shit. But I mean, at least,
well, yeah, in the case of Bush's actual British royalty.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, all roads lead to, excuse the irony, but Rome. So anyway. Oh, and the last thing is, I just thought it was funny, and this supposedly is a true news story, and that is that somebody was implanted with an RFID chip, got a computer virus. Seriously. That was reported out of the BCC.
That's a whole new meaning on the word.
Well, I mean, I'm going to be doing a series pretty soon with Paul Sandhu about transhumanism and these hybrids between computers and humans. But this raises a point also. Is it possible that if you implant people, however benign or good the reason is, and I'm not saying it's not out there, but could you possibly infect them? Could you make them sick? Could you perpetuate, or I should say perpetrate a genocide from implant holders, if you will?
Absolutely. I remember a story about an implant of some kind that was supposed to be beneficial that would release something or other or control some function. So that's been floated.
Anyway, the BCC came out with that story. It almost seems like too stupid, but we'll see how that goes. But that opens up another Pandora's box as far as what do you want inside your system, and that goes along with vaccines as well.
Well, there's been 2 or 3 Mothman witnesses who have made that comment to me, or told about a dream they had where there are these cybernetic bad guys.
Oh, geez, without a doubt.
That need to be fought. It's like we're going to be fighting as, the regular humans are going to be fighting against these guys that are going to be working for the government probably. And, I mean, it's been this plot of many science fiction stories, but. Well,
I mean, Gorightly and I had on Solaris Blue Raven, who was talking about electronic, psychotronic harassment, which I've done a lot of shows on through the years. Because although a lot of people think like that's goony, and it's hard sometimes to fix who does it, why do they do it, it happens. And there's no reason why not to believe that it continues to this day more sophisticatedly. And she talks about the fact that they can do it through a computer. So the point is, can you imagine that a whole population, given whatever they have lent themselves to, there has to be some kind of host placed in you or whatever, that could be controlled on a keyboard somewhere. I don't, it used to be laughable. I don't think it's laughable anymore.
And it's also not laughable in the sense that in this show I just saw, The Science of the Elite Soldier on the Military Channel, they openly brag about the fact that they looked at all these science fiction movies from the 50s. For instance, in those movies about UFOs back then and aliens, they would have little flying things that would fly around to spy on people.
Yeah.
And they show some of them from a movie, and they say this is how we came up with the idea for the flybys, these robotic mosquitoes and real beetles that they've mind controlled. So they love doing that. They love picking up on science fiction and taking it somewhere. And so if it's in science fiction that we have robotic humanoids, they're going to try to make them.
All right. And lastly, let me throw this to you, though. What if that was all known? And like we said, the old story about the person who said, if you see it in TV or movies, they had an R&D 50 years ago. What if that is the story for the general consumption? And in fact, they already knew what was going on. They threw that out basically as, shall we say,
revelation of the method?
And a preparer of the masses for what's going to happen. When the military says that, I think fully that was already in R&D. And that's my guess, but I think what we saw in science fiction in the 50s and 60s was already in the cooker.
Well, it's funny because in '66, the Harry Diamond Corporation was working with optical solids for lasers. Now, what does that mean? I think it means laser weapons, feeding something into the laser that can impact or something.
Well, think about the movie Goldfinger.
This is '66.
Well, the movie Goldfinger I saw as a kid, and I'm like, what is this stuff? This is Buck Rogers shit. This laser stuff. Remember that? Remember when James Bond is like stretched across the table with the laser going up his crotch?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about it. We're like, oh, yeah, okay, like, X-rays, yeah, great, death rays, okay. No, they knew and Ian Fleming, who wrote that book, was well aware of what was going on. So, honestly, I'd like to make a case for the fact that all that stuff, the military can say, oh, we got it from sci-fi, and I'm saying, okay, let's take it one step. You got it from sci-fi, who got it from you?
And what about the very new story here just yesterday that the CIA is in trouble because they're the ones controlling the drones and not the military, not supposedly? What about that little fight that's going on? Do you know about it?
Yeah.
Is it just?
I really don't know. If I were to throw something out, I'd be guilty of what I said before. I don't know where this is going. Why? All right, they're throwing it out. Does that mean then that there's going to be some kind of catharsis so the American people can feel like, okay, we really aren't that nasty? That's where I'm always thinking about this. When people get enough of it, they come out and they just, do something to smack somebody's hand or whatever. I don't know. The CIA has been whacked upside the head and all this stuff. Kennedy wanted to decimate it. And here we are like 40 plus years later and it's doing fine and they can keep on whacking on it. But, it's like, okay, great. It just goes away and comes back again. I know that's not probably a satisfactory answer, but the thing is, it's like whatever they're doing, they're going to continue to do. And if they're satisfying somebody's like angst about it, they'll give somebody up. No, I don't know. All I can tell you is whatever they're doing, they'll continue to do. And here's what I want to ask you also. Do you think or I know, or the American people know all the kind of crap that they've unleashed in out there as far as experimental military armament, bulletless, God knows what. Is that such a stretch to think that they've been, honestly experimenting with stuff that we have no idea about?
Well, yeah. I'm sure they are, including this crazy E. coli chip. They've figured out how to make E. coli into a either a transistor or it's a switch for computers, trying to, I don't know if E. coli specifically is for computers, but it was in an article about how they're trying to make petaflop computers that can do billions of calculations per second for the NSA. Anyway, it just makes me wonder about these E. coli breakouts. Like,
yeah, of course, and we've been
are
already
they testing E. coli chips and then it gets out? And I don't know.
And the other thing is also we've been already told that we're going to have another round of swine flu, whatever the hell it is. So,
all right.
I mean, all right, here's the scary part, okay? That truly, when the powers that want to be, want to unleash whatever they have, I mean, it could be a keyboard type of thing. Now, you would have to probably, in most cases, have something in you as a receptor. I'm guessing. Getting a vaccine, probably I'd stay away from. Just leave me alone. No implants or anything like that. But in the end, I think it highlights the fact that, especially in the United States with these patriots, or whatever they call them, I mean, that's such a horrible word. But I mean, they think they're going to get into some kind of firefight with the bad guys. And I'm like, man, armaments and military are like light years beyond that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So it's like, what are you thinking about? You're going to shoot bullets at what? People are going to use like pulses and rays and stuff? Are you nuts?
So how does the computer work for mind control remotely? Do they send a carrier wave back through the system?
I don't know, but I'll tell you what, Solaris, who some people could like say is a loose cannon and we're not really sure about her, I understand that. I understood that when they were talking about Eleanor White, who talked about psychotronic and electronic harassment. And I had people on that were very credible about it. It's happening that we can't, the old story, Andy. I mean, anybody who comes out and says something is like demonized. Anyway, Solaris came on the show with Adam and I with the transmissions from a dying planet. And, some of the stuff she said, I'm not cool with. Some of the stuff was very interesting. And that's why I wanted her to come on, because she seemed at least replete enough with information to say, okay, this is how it looks like that it happens. So I'm going to tell you honestly, I don't know the whole 9 yards. I don't know if I did, that I'd be okay with it. But again, I would rather have her in a forum where she can talk about it. Because obviously what we've talked about, and with this whole bit about the RFID chip that's out there, I mean, if it looks like a duck and it smells like a duck and it dumps like a duck, it's probably a duck.
I know a guy who works for that company, the main company here in Seattle. One of the founders of this RFID thing. I mean, I've met him several times at parties, but, he's never had a conversation with anybody.
Just don't shake hands with him.
He never says anything, ever. It's very odd. And they're all odd in that family. Very strange.
All right. So, does that bring
I don't know what it means.
Huh?
Probably some kind of, you just get the feeling, agent. I knew a couple of guys growing up who later became,
Are you taking a bath?
I suspect technicians for the NSA.
Are you washing dishes? Are you washing dishes?
All right. It wasn't really. No, it was something that was really bugging me.
Okay. That's all right. That's all right. When Kaminsky used to come on, he used to make himself sandwiches. That was horrible. All right.
Well, anyway, I was just talking about the profile. There's a certain profile that you sense.
Yeah, they're creeps. Hello. All right. We're going to bring this marathon to an end.
Yeah, I figured we must have broken a record there.
We'll have to take a look. Not that you were looking for that, but there's a possibility you might have. I don't know if having a break means anything, but I'll have to take a look at the total minutes. I know you broke Denton's record, that's for sure.
I don't know who has enough free time out there to listen to these.
Believe me. Put a sock in it, man. Believe me. Most of America. Oh, yes.
There's some people that just...
Well, let's put it this way. How many people in America, especially if they have trouble sleeping or whatever, listen to Coast, which is like now anywhere from 4 to 6 hours of bullshit? So what's the difference between if they download this and listen to 4 hours of this from people who they can relate to better, who aren't, and who are not trying to deceive anybody?
Speaking of Coast to Coast, George Navy seemed to have recruited these guys to make a Mothman documentary starting probably right about 2003. And it took them 6 years to do it. And I had seen Nori at the conspiracy convention before their movie came out, and he knew about my documentary, and he brought it up on air, and he goes, how does yours, we've seen other documentaries like Search for Mothman and the Mothman's Photographer. How does yours differ? from those, and he said, well, mine's the only one to do in-depth interviews. And it was produced by this professor from American University, which makes you wonder what would somebody from American University, have to do with Mothman? Why would they care? It's, spook school. So, that movie came out, last year right before the festival. The film broke and they had it didn't have a good premiere. But I just was contacted by a principal in Point Pleasant, principal player, who was wondering where those guys went. They seem to have dropped off the map. Both the guys that made the movie.
What a surprise! All right, we'll bring it to a close. This has been Think of Be Eaten with Andrew Colvin, and also that was the week that wasn't. We threw that in there as well, and deal with it. Thanks for coming on, and also seriously, I think down the road it would be nice if we can get you and Denton to come on at a time when things settle for both of you. Maybe late summer, the fall, whatever that should mean.
Yeah, right around that time, the Mothman Speaks should be coming out.
There you go. That's right. Absolutely. Okay, will you be cool with that?
Yeah.
All right,
thanks for having me on.
All right, stay right there, Andrew. Listen, this has been, as I said, Think of Be Eaten, and also that was the week that wasn't, week 21. Thank you for listening, and hope you come back.
A dinosaur fixation. Symbols of a crumbling world. Rich kid richer, and paradise is lost. Times are tough, every man for himself. Short-sighted decisions with long-term effects. It makes no sense, but we carry on further and further over the brink of salvation. And Lord helps those who help themselves, so help yourself.